From X-Men to Dimensional Gods. Chapter 21. Seeing Carl and Logan step out of the portal, the young mutants on the scene finally breathed a sigh of relief. What do we do now? We have to stop Shaw, or we're finished once she detonates that nuclear bomb. Moira anxiously explained her discovery to Carl. A nuclear bomb. Logan raised an eyebrow. They were going this big. Fortunately, Carl wasted no time and issued orders at once. Sean, Salvador, Riptide is yours. Hank, Amanda, Red Devil, yours. Charles, Eric, Shaw is yours. Alex, Raven, support. White Queen is mine. Victor, you take Logan. Any questions? Carl hadn't planned to seize command, but right now Charles was fully occupied guarding against Emma's telepathy. Everyone shook their heads. Eric's eyes were already reddening. Then quit wasting time. Move. Facing the oncoming young mutants, White Queen and her three allies didn't hesitate either. Riptide's body spun rapidly, turning into a hurricane that shot toward Sean and Salvador. Red Devil knew he was no match for Carl. His figure vanished as he engaged the equally formidable close-quarters fighters Beast and Amanda. Eric, unable to wait, charged into the submarine to find Shaw. Neither White Queen nor Victor tried to stop him. The newly arrived Victor had no such intention. At this moment nothing thrilled him more than seeing his dear brother, Logan. As for White Queen, this was her first encounter with Carl, and in an instant she realized her telepathy was useless against this stranger. Instantly on guard, she shifted into her diamond form. Carl had no interest in interrupting the brothers' reunion, so he spoke to the dazzling White Queen before him. Ms. Emma, relax, I never harm a beautiful lady. After a glance at the two brothers locked in silent eye contact, he added. Shall we change venues? We could sit down over coffee and chat while we wait for this to finish. Looking at Carl's playboy grin and then at the brothers beside her, Emma let her diamond skin fade and replied with a charming smile. Why not? Victor and Logan showed little interest in the departing pair. Victor's gaze stayed fixed on Logan. Long time no see, James. Never thought you'd join these scouts. Logan ignored the jab. 15 years, Victor. Since when did you want to destroy the world? I don't recall you joining this Hellfire Club for that. No big deal. People like us are born for war, without it we're useless. Then this guy found me, seemed interesting, so I joined. Logan didn't doubt him. So what now? Victor's grin turned eager as sharp claws slid out from his nails. Thought this gig would be boring, no interest in your scouts, but here you are, James. Let's see if you've improved these 15 years. Logan's expression lit up as bone claws extended from his knuckles. As you wish. The brothers tore into each other in an instant. Compared with the mutants fighting nearby, Carl's side was surprisingly calm. Were it not for the warships and drifting smoke, Carl might have been on vacation. The Cuban coastline really was beautiful. Sun, sand, and a beautiful woman. Emma, walking beside Carl, studied him with bright eyes. Of course she knew who Carl was. A well-educated white woman, she had read many of his works. Learning he was also a mutant who had Shaw feeling threatened, enough to recruit the crude Victor, only deepened her interest. Especially now that they didn't have to fight. Let's watch from here, walking too far would be impolite. After a short stroll Carl stopped, turned, and offered his hand to the tense Emma. Surprised, she placed her hand in his. They shared a light, gentlemanly shake before parting. Honestly, Ms. Emma, you're even lovelier than I imagined. Seeing his flirtatious manner, Emma finally relaxed. Mr. Lance, how many women have you said that to? Call me Carl. No gloomy topics right now. Instead, Ms. Emma, where do you plan to go from here? Emma looked at him. Stay with Shaw, wait for World War III, then rule the world. Spare me the canned lines, Ms. Emma. Why? Think these scouts can beat Shaw? Stop fooling yourself, Emma. Carl nodded without hesitation and pointed at the warships on the horizon. See those US and Soviet vessels. From the moment mutants revealed themselves to the world, even if Shaw detonates the bomb, World War III is off the table. Care to wager? A wager. On what? That those ships will soon turn their guns on us. If I lose, I'll grant any wish within my power. But if I win. His gaze turned openly covetous as he looked her over. I want you. Emma trembled, met his eyes, hesitated only a moment, then smiled crisply. I accept. The instant she agreed, the US and Soviet warships in the distance changed course and trained their guns on them. Emma's pupils widened. Her telepathy told her she had already lost. Looks like you've won. From this moment, I'm yours. Carl offered his hand with satisfaction. Welcome, Emma, my White Queen. You've made the wisest choice. Their hands clasped tightly together. Emma's charming smile returned. So, my king, what now? Time for our grand finale. With Charles and Eric's act nearly over, it was Carl's turn to appear. He had no wish to steal their spotlight, but showing his face was essential. Suddenly Carl's acute spatial sense detected a change. He snapped his gaze toward an impossible sight. 5 golden rectangular portals materialized before him. 5 figures in black combat suits, helmets, and armed to the teeth stepped through, agents. Their leader, a black man holding a device like a game console, pronounced coldly. Carl Lance, unique time variant. By the Time Variance Authority, for violating the sacred timeline, you are under arrest. Hands up, come with us. In that instant Carl's pupils contracted sharply, slipping into hypersensory state as his irises turned pale blue. The Time Variance Authority. Of course Carl knew about them. They were the crown jewel of Marvel's Phase 4, the still intact agency featured in Loki that polices the multiverse. But this is supposed to be the X-Men world, isn't it? How could Marvel's time managers have any jurisdiction here? Yet their appearance spelled big trouble. After all, the real power behind the TVA is Kong the Conqueror. A foe the current Carl has zero chance of defeating. But when his gaze lands on the handheld console gripped by the lead black agent, his eyes turn covetous. That must be the multiverse-hopping device of the Time Variance Authority, the Time Controller. As a transmigrator, Carl knows full well the treasures the Marvel Universe holds. They dwarf anything in the X-Men world. Advanced tech, sorcery, superpowers, cosmic artifacts. Right now mutants seem untouchable, but once humanity catches on, countermeasures will evolve rapidly. Sentinels, those absurdly overpowered robots, are the prime example. In Carl's eyes they're even tougher than Iron Man's armor. And historically they're invented in the 1970s. Hell, the internet barely exists yet. Which is why Carl keeps a low profile. Humans in the X-Men universe are ridiculously unreasonable. Even with his current strength, against Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix he's still an ant. But if he can reach the Marvel universe and leverage foreknowledge to obtain magic and Infinity Stones, he'll be invincible. Future mutant crises will pale in comparison, even the Phoenix Force could be contested. The thought ignites a fire inside him. Glancing aside, he notices Emma frozen wide-eyed, unblinking, time stop or some other power. Carl's shock doesn't surprise the TVA agents. They've seen it countless times, every variant wears that expression, but explanations are a waste of breath. They have to prune the variants quickly and restore the timeline. The lead agent draws the baton from his belt and strides toward Carl. Don't resist. I won't hold back. He produces a collar-like device and moves to clamp it around Carl's neck. A frigid voice whispers in his ear. You shouldn't have come so close. What? Impossible. You. Before the agent can react, pale blue energy floods his body. In an instant the world around him balloons outward. No, he realizes he's the one shrinking. The agent reaches for his time controller, but it's gone. Overhead, the variant is holding it. The other agents swing their pruning rods, but Carl has already vanished through a portal. A grenade lands at their feet, belching white smoke. Within seconds all 4 agents collapse. The gas was originally meant for Sebastian Shaw. He can absorb kinetic energy, but not chemical attacks. The anesthetic can knock out an elephant, let alone a human. The TVA agents just happened to walk into the trap. Carl reappears, studying the time controller in his hand, eyes blazing. Off the coast of Cuba. Although Carl's influence was present, without his direct involvement the plot still followed its original course. Eric succeeded in his revenge, killing Sebastian Shaw. The war between mutants came to an end. But humanity's assault followed. Countless warships launched missiles intent on wiping out the mutants. Unfortunately, in Eric's hands those missiles were nothing more than toys for him to play with. Eric meant to use the missiles to annihilate the human fleet. Charles tried to stop him, but he was no match for Eric, who now wore the helmet. At that moment Moira fired a shot to intervene. Then, as if fated, a bullet Eric deflected struck Charles in the spine. No. 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 Holding Charles in his arms, Eric stared in disbelief and regret. Moira, Raven and the others covered their mouths in shock. Yet because of this the human fleet was saved. The missiles detonated harmlessly in the sky. Only then did Carl and Emma reappear before everyone. Am I too late? Everyone remained silent. Only Raven, like a little girl, sobbed, Carl, Charles has been shot. He's been shot. Since it's all over, let's get him to the hospital. Eric glanced at Charles, then at Carl, Emma, Salvador and Darwin beside him. No, Carl. Charles is in your hands. Humanity will never accept us. We are fated to walk a different path. Who will come with me? On the spot the group split into 3 camps. By Charles stood Hank, Sean and Alex. With Carl were Emma, Salvador and Darwin. At Eric's side were Red Devil and Riptide. As for Logan and Victor, they had never belonged to any faction. Only Raven, torn between Charles and Carl, could not decide. 5 days flashed past. The Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved, and people enjoyed a peaceful weekend. At Charles's ancient castle, under the bright sun, Charles, seated in his wheelchair, chose to erase every memory of himself from Moira with a gentle kiss, then watched her depart in a daze, his own expression complicated. At that moment a voice sounded behind him. If it were me, I wouldn't have done that. Without turning, Charles replied. That's why, Carl, Eric and I are not the same kind of people. With that he slowly turned, looking at Carl, whose gaze followed the departing Moira, and asked. I couldn't give Moira what she wanted, just as I can't give Raven what she wants, but perhaps you can. I don't know, but one thing is certain, I won't let anyone harm the people close to me. Meeting Carl's sincere, confident eyes, Charles suddenly smiled. Remember how you said a triangle is stable? Carl, I'm more and more convinced. Eric and I are 2 extremes, such balance is easily broken. With you in the middle, however, you can be the stabilizing point. Honestly, neither Eric nor I can handle our own problems as smoothly as you do. Carl answered only with a smile. Would you push me inside? Of course. Carl wheeled Charles into the castle, where Emma, Salvador, Darwin and Logan had already packed everything. Yes, with the immediate crisis over, Carl was ready to leave. Raven sat on the sofa, her eyes full of struggle as the 2 entered. She could not choose. Carl did not force her. Stepping forward, he said decisively. Raven, come with me. Remember the gift I promised you. Their eyes met. Raven longed to agree, yet still glanced at Charles. They had grown up together. Would leaving him now be too cruel in his current state? But Charles had already made his decision. Raven, I'm sorry, I can't give you what you want. He knew her feelings. As the world's strongest telepath he could hardly miss them, yet for her he felt only a brother's affection. Tears welled in Raven's eyes, they embraced, and then she returned to Carl's side. Carl looked at everyone present. Then, goodbye, Charles, and all of you. Until we meet again. When Raven and the others opened their eyes again, they were already in Abyssinia, East Africa. The sudden change in climate made everyone uncomfortable. Compared with the already damp and chilly October air of New York, the scorching, dry breath of the equator hit them the moment they arrived. Through the windows they could see the endless grasslands and hills outside. Where is this place? Logan walked straight onto the terrace, gazing at the city that felt as if it had stepped out of the Middle Ages, and asked in amazement. Raven, Salvador, Emma and Darwin were also curious. This is the capital of Abyssinia in East Africa, Yeba. No wonder. At a glance Logan saw the chaotic street below, crowded with Africans and filled with a primitive, backward atmosphere. Salvador and Darwin weren't surprised that Carl had brought them here. They knew Carl wielded extraordinary power in Africa, but Raven and Emma were curious. It seems rather chaotic here. In fact, without Logan pointing it out, everyone could hear sporadic gunfire outside the city. Yes, the country is in civil war, but don't worry, the capital is relatively safe. Now everyone was even more curious why Carl had brought them here. But before explaining, Carl asked Logan, what are your plans next? If you want to stay, this villa is yours for as long as you like. If you have other ideas I can send you wherever you wish, though I don't recommend returning to the States. Logan thought for a moment and said, Send me to Canada. I've arranged to meet Victor there. Canada was the homeland of both Logan and Victor. The brotherly bond between you two is truly strange. Before leaving, Carl handed Logan a card and a business card. This is the gold card I promised. Call the number on it and they'll tell you where to find free drinks. As for the business card, tear it up or call the number if you need me. And if you're short on cash, don't hesitate to ring, it's pocket change to me. Logan took both cards without the slightest politeness. For some reason, though they'd known each other only briefly, Logan felt he got along well with Carl, as if the man understood him. Don't worry, I won't stand on ceremony. Good. After Carl saw Logan off and returned, he addressed the four remaining, his nascent team. All right. Though I'm not one for sentimentality, I must say I'm honored by the trust of you three ladies. The three women rolled their eyes in unison. And you, Amanda, from now on we are family. Amanda nodded earnestly. Since we're family, I can speak openly instead of talking in riddles. First, I'm sure you're all curious why I brought you here. Emma crossed her elegant long legs, Raven sat like an obedient college student, Salvador looked expectant, while Amanda remained calm. They might have been back in Charles's castle for a fireside chat, only the people had changed. There's only one reason. Next, we're going to secretly take control of this country. Carl's bold declaration made everyone's pupils dilate. Raven in particular showed boundless worry. Fortunately, Carl's next words eased some of their doubts. Abyssinia is special, one of the few African nations never fully colonized, meaning America, the Soviet Union, and Europe have little control here. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, the existence of us mutants is known to the two superpowers. Though we can't be sure what they'll do, we must prepare for a possibly grim future and find a safe haven for our kind. After careful selection, this country seems the most suitable. Everyone's expression relaxed as they recognized the importance of this precaution. Now is the perfect opportunity. Civil war rages here, in my view it won't end soon, while America is busy with the Soviets and can't spare attention for this backwater. Emma's eyes lit up. She had to admit she sensed the alluring brilliance of Carl's intellect, not the doomed madness of a Shaw-like fanatic. Raven, a top student, quickly grasped Carl's idea, yet a vestige of naivete made her ask uneasily. Carl, this civil war, does it have anything to do with you? Carl rolled his eyes, unbothered by the awkward situation, and took Raven's hand. Raven, you have to trust me. Raven's unease faded, perhaps she had misjudged him. I'm a pacifist, the Civil War has nothing to do with me. I said this country is special. It escaped full colonization because the would-be colonizers were the Italians. Feel free to look it up. In short, those troops were so inept they couldn't even beat the locals, yet they still seized part of the country, the Red Sea coastal region of Tigray. Though Italy never fully colonized the land, their rule over Tigray left the peoples of the two regions estranged even after Abyssinia's unification. For 20 years the royal house granted Tigray high autonomy, until this year, when the emperor decided to revoke it, sparking the civil war. After this history lesson Raven felt even more ashamed. Emma seemed to catch on and asked, so what do you plan to do? Simple, force won't work. Unlike typical African nations, having repelled the Italians gives the people strong pride, yet poverty and chaos are obvious. So we go soft. With that, Carl looked toward Amanda and Salvador. Amanda, Salvador, you're of African descent and can blend in. I'll arrange new identities for you as members of the royal family. Raven, I'll place all my enterprises under your control. You'll cooperate with Amanda and Salvador to gradually take over the country through education, economy, industry, religion, and politics. Emma, I'll need your telepathy, should be second nature to you. Emma nodded, understanding. After all, she was the woman who once played two superpowers, and a future leader of the X-Men. Her talent was beyond doubt. The young Raven, not yet Mystique, panicked. Me. No, Ms. Emma is far more suitable. Raven was timid. She had no idea how vast Carl's holdings were, but the tip of the iceberg she'd seen was staggering, and she'd only just graduated. No, Emma was captured by the CIA, so she can't show her face. Neither can I. But you're different, even if the CIA has records of you, you can simply change your appearance. Believe in yourself, Raven. I'm giving you this task for an even bigger goal, the gift I'm preparing for you. On the boundless savannah, an off-road vehicle sped across it. Amanda, the cabbie, took the wheel. Carl rode shotgun. 3 women sat in the back. All were dressed like explorers, hats, long trousers, long sleeves. Clearly, Africa's roads at this time left much to be desired. After the reasonably comfortable grassland, 2 mountains flanking a canyon and river loomed ahead. The road turned rough. Carl could have brought them here directly through a portal, but he hadn't. First, he needed Raven and the others to know where they were headed, and second, he enjoyed the scenery, like stretching your legs after sitting too long. An hour later they arrived at the foot of a colossal mountain. Everyone was puzzled why Carl had brought them here, but he offered no explanation, simply had them get out and start climbing. Soon they sensed something odd. This barren peak deep in the African savanna had man-made stone steps, and along the way strange leopard-like totems appeared. Curiosity spiked, especially Raven's, since Carl had said this related to her gift. They followed the stairs upward. After 2 more hours they spotted a strange cave mouth halfway up the slope, flanked by mysterious inscriptions. Apart from Carl and Amanda, the 3 women were panting. Carl, excited, pointed at the symbols. Do you know what these characters mean? He didn't keep them guessing. It's an ancient script. It reads, Wakanda. Wakanda. The cryptic name startled all 4. Yes. In the valley beneath us once stood a mighty ancient civilization, as old as Egypt, destroyed long ago. Indeed, this was the Wakanda of the X-Men world. The X-Men world had to contain Wakanda, because adamantium existed here, and adamantium is forged from vibranium plus other rare elements. After Carl sent subordinates to track down Wakanda, news returned swiftly. Some African seers still remembered the name, a powerful kingdom. But ages ago it was destroyed by an Egyptian pharaoh of immense divine power. Carl studied the reports. From the description of that mighty pharaoh he felt certain it must be the X-Men world's first mutant, Apocalypse. And the secret of Wakanda's civilization lies inside this cave. The 4 were stunned. Raven voiced what she was thinking. Could it be the aliens you mentioned, Carl? Carl answered with a cryptic smile. Not aliens, close enough. Follow me and you'll see. Each lit a prepared torch and entered. The interior was pitch black, only vast caverns and rock. After an indeterminate trek through a damp chamber over 10 meters high, Carl finally halted. We're here. Here. They were puzzled. The torches barely pierced the darkness, illuminating even less than usual, so they could see no difference from where they'd been. Just another closed cave. Carl wedged his torch into a wall crevice and moved to a nearby rock face, feeling for a huge stone. Don't blink, miracle incoming. Pale blue spatial magic surged from him into the massive stone. BZZT. The underground space rebooted. From the stone Carl touched, blue veins spread like a spider web. The black cavern flared to life, revealing a vast subterranean world. At that instant 5 faces were bathed in azure light. Those veins proved to be countless crystal-like stones overhead and around them, glittering like stars in the cosmos. What is this? Raven stared in disbelief at the dreamlike scene. The others were equally awestruck, feeling they'd entered a wondrous underworld. Vibranium. Carl supplied the answer. Under their stunned gazes he explained slowly, every glowing stone you see is what I call vibranium. It's not native to Earth. A meteor laden with it crashed here in ancient times, creating everything before us. Carl traced the luminous vibranium. Seizing Abyssinia is merely my cover. My real objective is this vibranium. It possesses incredible properties, rarer than gold. With it we can forge a mighty mutant kingdom. Relying on that power, we can deter humanity from persecuting mutants, granting us true equality. That's my gift to you, so, Raven, are you satisfied? At that moment Raven's heart shook. She was overwhelmed by Carl's grand vision. So were the others. Founding a nation and dynasty for mutants was beyond their imagination. Yet if such a day ever came, how magnificent it would be. There's no future I'd rather fight for. Thank you, Carl. Raven rushed over, kissed him softly, and hugged him. Whether or not the dream came true, the vision alone was worth her devotion. Salvador showed no jealousy. She'd already received what she wanted from Carl. Emma understood her own position. She merely wondered if the medal was truly as miraculous as Carl claimed. Her finger shifted to diamond and scraped across the vibranium. Then she saw something unbelievable. The hardest diamond on Earth couldn't leave the faintest scratch on the so-called vibranium. Incredible. Now Emma half believed, but Carl's next words showed she'd still underestimated. Yes. Vibranium is arguably the hardest metal in the universe. It can absorb kinetic energy, surpassing even Shah's gift. Master it and we gain power to stand against all humanity. Everyone's pupils contracted, they finally grasped why Carl prized the metal so. Precisely because of that, this place must stay hidden. For now we can't exploit it, we lack both the technology and trusted personnel. Emma, that's where you come in. Anticipation lit Emma's eyes. I'll establish a school to educate and manage mutants, preparing for future vibranium development. You, Emma, will be its headmistress. As for the name, how does X Future Academy sound? Emma's eyes sparkled. X Future Academy. Carl's plan once again made everyone present brighten up. Yes, the X stands for us mutants, and the future means that we mutants are the future of humankind. Nice name. But do you really think I can become the headmistress of this school? Of course, Emma. I've never doubted your talent. Emma's eyes sparkled. No woman can resist the feeling of being trusted like this. Then it seems I have no reason to refuse. Great. Then, Headmistress Emma Frost, let's talk about the purpose of X Future Academy. In this era, the number of future mutants will only increase, many are already hiding. Our academy has two duties. First, to protect the mutants who will appear, and second, to shelter and teach those who have already appeared. But right now our school doesn't have a single teacher. That's not a problem, we're just starting. While searching for our kind, you can find those suitable to be teachers, especially those with great intellect like Hank who can help us develop vibranium. Besides, you have a gift like Charles. Next, I'll get the Cerebro from Hank, so you can locate our kind more easily. I have no objections. But where do you plan to build our school? This place certainly won't do. Good question. Fortunately, I'm prepared. Have you ever heard of St. Helena Island? Everyone was taken aback. The name of the island was clearly unfamiliar to them. But you know Napoleon, right? At that, everyone nodded. After Waterloo, the anti-French coalition exiled Napoleon to that island until he died. They chose it because it's far from any continent. The closest land is Africa, still more than 2,000 kilometers away. No one pays attention to the island. Once again, their eyes lit up. Emma, utterly captivated by Carl's thorough planning, said dreamily. But that's no problem for you. Exactly. We must make full use of our gifts and, like rabbits, always have several escape plans. Saying this, Carl looked at everyone present, especially Raven, and said gently. I've always said I have no wish to hurt anyone. I love every beautiful thing on this planet and can't bear to destroy them. Everyone's gaze turned to Carl. But that doesn't mean I'll wait until humans start persecuting us before we resist, by then it would be too late. So, from now on, Raven, Salvador, Emma, Amanda, we must unite and prepare for the worst that might come. At this moment, all of their expressions became grave. Whether it's taking control of this country, founding X Future Academy, or building our own mutant kingdom, it's all preparation. At the very least, I hope our children and descendants, in the distant future, won't feel confused about being mutants and can live happily on this earth. None of the four spoke, but the resolute look in their eyes showed their determination. Carl nodded, satisfied. Yet he knew that relying on words alone couldn't guarantee their loyalty 100%. Even if they were loyal now, the future was uncertain, for a human heart is the hardest thing to grasp. The four before him weren't unchanging machines after a program was written, they were living people with their own minds. After the carrot, they'd need the stick. All right, that's enough about the future. Next, an accident. You must be curious why I didn't help you fight Shah. Maybe if I had, Charles wouldn't be in a wheelchair now. Carl's words were mainly directed at Raven. Emma certainly wouldn't care, and although Salvador and Amanda respected Charles, Carl mattered more to them. Only Raven, though she now stayed with Carl, still placed Charles above him in her heart. After all, the two had grown up together. Carl didn't keep them guessing and said directly. Because while you were fighting Shah, I was attacked too. Everyone was shocked. Even Emma looked astonished. You're wondering why you didn't know, since you were with me the whole time. Emma, it's simple. Although I don't know how they did it, they seem to have a power like time suspension or something similar that made you lose all perception during that period. The shock deepened. Time suspension, what a terrifying ability. Had another group of mutants been watching them while they fought? Who were they? Emma asked, her face darkening. Come with me, I'm curious too. With that, Carl opened a portal and led everyone into a sealed, container-like space. On the wall, 5 men stripped to their underwear hung unconscious in chains. Who are they? Raven no longer doubted Carl. She looked at the 5 with a mix of guilt and curiosity. I don't know, but Emma's power can give us answers. Don't worry, they've been injected with anesthetic. Without the antidote they'll never wake up. The rest is up to you, Emma. No problem, leave it to me. I'll dig out every secret in their heads. Emma narrowed her eyes at the 5 TVA agents, her expression dangerous. In the villa at Abeba, Carl had achieved his goal. Everyone back from Wakanda looked grim and shaken. Raven's face was pale as well. The so-called Time Variance Authority agents were merely well-equipped humans. Under Emma's telepathic ability, they had little resistance, and everything they knew was unearthed. Although as agents they didn't know everything, the mere glimpse of the future they revealed terrified the 4. Emma used her telepathy to pass the images of that future to the other 3. Each of them saw the fate that should have been theirs. Amanda would die the night Shaw attacked. Emma and Salvador would be captured and dissected by humans. And then there was the terrifying man named Bolivar Trask. Those horrific scenes left the 3 directly involved ashen, and even Raven was horrified. As for the Time Variance Authority, the sacred timeline, the multiverse, the time variance, none of that mattered now. Carl finally understood why the Time Variance Authority from Marvel could intervene in the X-Men's world. After Loki became the god of stories, he grabbed all the scattered timelines and forged them into a single tree of time, opening a brand new multiverse where every timeline could coexist. Some of those branches had once been pruned by Kong the Conqueror. Now, under Loki's power, they sprang back to life and merged into the tree, becoming independent universes and timelines. Feels a bit like regained rights. If the multiverse could coexist, why was the Time Variance Authority still hunting Carl? Emma found no answer inside the agents' minds. Their orders were simple: capture Carl and return this world's timeline to normal. Still, it was better this way. The TVA under the god of stories didn't randomly erase timelines, and Loki was no madman like Kong. While Carl pondered, Amanda, first to speak, looked around the gloomy living room. I don't want to die. Salvador followed, face ashen. I don't want to end up on a human dissection table either. Emma said nothing, but her icy glare spoke volumes. Until now, human persecution of mutants had been only Carl's suspicion. The future they'd just seen was undeniable proof. Of the 4, Raven, still untransformed into Mystique, was the most shaken. The visions from the future left her at a loss. She turned to Carl, eyes pleading. So, Carl, what do we do? Do we tell Charles and Eric? According to the captured agent's memories, humans would move against mutants next year. No, right now. And Eric would assassinate Kennedy, deepening human hatred. No, not yet. Carl refused. The others stared, bewildered. Carl's reason was simple. I don't trust Charles or Eric. Not because I doubt their ability to keep secrets, but because of their methods. Charles trusts humans too much. Tell him everything and he'll still choose coexistence. Even if we stop next year's persecution, nothing will ever really change. Everyone nodded. They understood. Charles's approach would never end human oppression. As for Eric, it would only push him further into extremism, and possibly expose everything we know. Silence fell. No one could refute Carl's words. Raven asked, lost, so we do nothing. No, we stick to our original plan. Stay the course, adapt as things unfold. Nothing's happened yet, we still have time. We must quietly recruit more of our kind, build the strength to protect ourselves and stop the tragedy before it strikes. They looked at one another. It was the only sensible option. Only then did they truly unite. What about the TVA agents? They won't let us go after we've taken theirs, and I don't want to die for some timeline. All eyes were on Carl. They knew he was the only reason they were still alive. They felt no alienation toward Carl. In the agents' memories, mutants were common, lucky ones. From this moment on, Carl's place in their hearts was unshakable. Only Carl could save them. Carl wasn't worried, he was excited. I was concerned, but this might be our opportunity. Opportunity. They blinked. Pale blue light flashed in Carl's hand. A game console-like device expanded. Emma, who'd seen it in the agent's memories, recognized it instantly. Time controller. The TVA isn't invincible, those agents were just humans with fancy gear. We can't build it yet, but Emma, dig through their minds and find out how this works. With it, we'll know our world's future, and draw strength from other universes to protect ourselves. Night. After a day of bizarre events, everyone retired to their rooms, hearts still racing. Carl remained calm. As long as the TVA wasn't run by Kong the Conqueror, he wasn't overly worried. Under the bedroom light, he studied the TVA handbook taken from the agents. Their equipment had already been shrunk into the microverse by spatial magic. Safer than any warehouse, even if trackers existed, no one could locate it. If danger arose, he could hide inside that world. An incredibly convenient ability. Unless Thanos snapped his fingers, Carl was confident he could survive. Unfortunately, its mass limitation kept him from fully exploiting it. A knock interrupted him. Come in. The door opened. Raven stood there in white pajamas, already in her blue-scaled mystique form. Carl rose, smiling, he loved seeing her like this. Can't sleep. Raven rolled her eyes and lunged, arms around his neck. Carl didn't hesitate, hands finding her waist, pulling her close as he kicked the door shut and backed toward the bed. Moments later, they reached the edge. Carl pressed her down onto the mattress and leaned over. The kiss deepened, and Raven's legs were already wrapped around Carl's waist. Although Carl could feel Raven beneath him becoming utterly lost in passion, he didn't take it further. Instead, he slowly let go of Raven, looking into her golden eyes, and kissed her face starting from her lips, saying breathlessly, "You are so beautiful, Raven." But as soon as he spoke, he noticed a hint of fear and confusion in Raven's eyes. What's wrong? I'm scared. Carl instantly understood the reason. Is it because you saw those terrible futures? Raven didn't answer, but her gaze said it all. Don't worry. With a time variant like me around, the future of our universe is bound to be different. Carl's tone was relaxed, but Raven became even more anxious. So, you really want to use that time controller to go to other universes? Carl realized that Raven's fear wasn't what he had imagined. What is it? Can I go with you? This made Carl genuinely confused. Why? I'm afraid, in case you can't come back. At this, Carl finally understood what Raven was truly afraid of. Sometimes unknown death isn't scary. What's scary is the desperate wait after hope disappears. Carl leaned down, hugging Raven tightly, looking into her bright eyes. Of course, Carl wouldn't refuse. I understand. I promise you. Instantly, Raven's eyes softened so much they seemed about to melt. Raven nodded gently, and their eyes met. No more words were needed, the two slowly embraced. This time, Raven did not pull away, allowing Carl to explore her body. This night was destined to be long. 7 days later. Mutant abilities certainly possess an overwhelming advantage over ordinary humans. Especially telepathic ability, like that of Charles and Emma. With almost no obstruction, under the combined assault of Carl's money and Emma's telepathic ability. Salvador and Amanda became the long-lost son and daughter of Nubia Lassie I, the Emperor of Abyssinia. The entire chain of evidence was manufactured flawlessly by Carl and Emma. Nubia Lassie I had previously lived in exile in Britain between 1936 and 1941 due to the Italian invasion. Salvador and Amanda were established as the children Nubia left behind in Britain during this period. The essence of forgery is 9 parts truth and 1 part falsehood. It could be said that aside from Salvador and Amanda's identities being fake, everything else in the evidence chain was real, including their mother and those around her, whose memories Emma modified using telepathic ability to make them completely believe in the existence of these 2 children. As for the rest of the evidence, needless to say, anything can be forged as long as there is money. In this era, technology was not yet advanced, and DNA paternity testing was not widespread. Carl only needed to bribe a few people to perfectly forge the royal bloodline of the 2 children. Next, Salvador and Amanda only needed to focus on improving their abilities and wait for Lassie I to accidentally, discover the existence of his two bloodlines, thereby gaining royal status. Of course, if that were all, the two still wouldn't have a chance to enter the royal family, but luckily, during his exile in Britain, Lassie I had sent his children back one by one to fight the colonists, leading to their heroic deaths. This meant Lassie I currently had no surviving children. Carl has done everything he can. Next, it depends on how well Salvador and Amanda perform themselves. Naturally, Carl is quite confident about this. After all, they have Emma helping them with her telepathic ability, plus his financial support. And having prepared everything, it was time to head to the new world. St. Helena Island. As the future location of the X-Future Academy. After handling everything, Carl brought Raven, Emma, Salvador, and Amanda here. When they arrived, everyone was a little surprised. Because what appeared before them was a wooden villa built on the edge of a cliff, surrounded by a fence. Carl, do you actually have a home here too? Raven asked curiously. Since the two of them had slept together, Raven quickly transformed from a girl into a woman. Not only had she matured significantly, changing her straight hair to waves, but she had also become completely intimate with Carl. Yes. Ever since I awakened my ability, I've always lacked a sense of security, you know. So, I've been searching the world for places no one can reach, setting up my safe houses there. That way, even if the apocalypse descends, I'll survive until the end. Carl said, walking up the stairs and pushing the door open. Come in. I built this house with my own hands. There were originally some natives on this island, but I sent them away. It's just a shame that the island is still nominally subordinate to Britain. I tried to buy it, but I was refused. Fortunately, I am the only person here now. For safety, I haven't let anyone clean it, so it's a bit dusty. This was a minor issue, and everyone quickly cleaned it up. To be honest, this was the work Carl hated the most, making him sometimes wish he could awaken an ability like telekinesis to avoid such tedious tasks. As for finding a loyal servant, the current Carl only trusts himself. After everything was tidied up, Carl didn't waste any time. He asked directly after seating everyone. Well, Emma, have you figured out this time controller thing? Emma nodded. The machine itself isn't difficult to use, the hard part is knowing the specific time point and timeline we need to go to. Are there any results? There are some details in the memories of those agents, such as Earth 10005, which is the designation they gave our universe, and then Earth TRN 414, Earth 17315, Earth TRNH 818, and so on. There are also some that are the same universe but have different timelines, like our current world. However, the troublesome thing is that these agents only know things relevant to their missions, but they don't understand the specific situations of those universes. This seems to be intentional on the part of the Time Variance Authority. Carl understood. So, we have to try them one by one. Everyone's expression darkened. After all, the unknown means danger. But Carl felt relatively calm. Perhaps those universes are unknown to Emma and the others, but not necessarily to Carl, the transmigrator. So, Carl quickly made up his mind. It looks like we have to take a gamble. He finished speaking, and as pale blue spatial magic appeared in his hands, 3 sets of TVA agent equipment materialized before everyone. Why use Earth 10005 for the current universe designation? Because Fox did not set a separate designation for the first-class universe, possibly because it was designed as a prequel, I couldn't find one. If anyone knows, please post it. Therefore, this novel uses the universe designation of the old version of X-Men. Regarding universe designations, aside from those with specific numbers, I will mostly set them myself. Here are some that have been confirmed. Earth 96283. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film series. Earth 120703. The Garfield The Amazing Spider-Man film series. Earth 121347. The Ghost Rider film world. Earth 121698. The 2005 Fantastic Four film series world. Earth 199999. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, the world of films independently produced by Marvel Studios and related works. Earth TRN 414. The Fox X-Men film series world after Wolverine reversed the future in Days of Future Past. Earth TRN 565. The original universe of Gwenpool. Earth TRN 732. The Avengers timeline that Tony, Steve, and Scott traveled to in Avengers Endgame. Earth TRN 733. The Thor, the Dark Dimension timeline that Thor and Rocket Raccoon traveled to in Avengers Endgame. Earth TRN 734. The Guardians of the Galaxy timeline that War Machine, Nebula, Hawkeye, and Black Widow traveled to in Avengers Endgame. Earth TRN 735. The 70s S.H.I.E.L.D. timeline that Tony and Steve traveled to in Avengers Endgame. Earth TRN 736. The world Captain America arrived at using Pym particles after returning the Infinity Stones in Mjolnir, where he reunited with Peggy. Earth TRN 867. The timeline where Kid Loki killed young Thor in the Loki series. Earth TRN 868. The timeline where Loki was not killed by Thanos in Avengers Infinity War, i.e., the original timeline of King Loki in the Loki series. Earth TRN 869. The original timeline of Alligator Loki in the Loki series. Earth TRN 870. The world where the Kong the Conqueror variant, He Who Remains won the multiversal war in the Loki series, which is the main setting of the show. Earth TRN 925. The timeline where Green Goblin was cured in Spider-Man No Way Home. Earth TRN 926. The timeline where Dr. Octopus was cured in Spider-Man No Way Home. Earth TRN 927. The timeline where Sandman was cured in Spider-Man No Way Home. Earth TRN 928. The timeline where the Lizard was cured in Spider-Man No Way Home. Earth TRN 929. The timeline where Electro was cured in Spider-Man No Way Home. 32. Earth 7642. In this universe, Marvel and DC characters coexist. It also includes characters from other franchises, such as Transformers, Wild Sea, ATS, Witchblade, She, and Attack on Titan. 83. Earth 12318. The world where Godzilla dueled the Shogun Warriors, and NFL SuperPro dueled Rom. Earth 17315. The Logan, the Death Battle film world. Earth 17372. The world of the TV series The Gifted. Earth 91274. The world where Transformers and G.I. Joe reside. Earth 10005. The Fox 2000 X-Men film series world. What is this? Carl answered Raven's curiosity and voiced his own thoughts. This is the equipment I stripped off the 3 TVA agents you saw. Emma, you must have seen it in their memories. Emma nodded. Carl took out the time controller from the equipment and handed it to Emma. Very well. Before we proceed with the plan, I need to confirm one thing. Emma, please open a portal. Anyone is fine. Emma took it, slightly nervous. Of course. Don't worry, I trust your luck. Under everyone's gaze, Emma thought for a moment and began pressing the keys on the time controller. Soon, Emma had set everything up, and Carl glanced at the screen. To be honest, Carl couldn't understand the coordinates displayed, so he asked. Why did you choose this one? Emma replied after recalling the memory. These coordinates represent Earth, 17,315. Time, 2029. Location, Canadian border. I saw it in the memories of those agents. At this timeline and time point, there seems to be a time variant just like you. The colleagues of those 5 agents went to execute this mission, and I saw these coordinates in the memory. 2029. Canadian border. Carl's eyes immediately lit up. Because this time point was too interesting. In 2029, setting aside all the chaotic universes he might not know about, among those Carl was aware of, the only one that reached so far on the timeline seemed to be Logan. Even Marvel hadn't gone that far. And, the Canadian border. Interesting. Seeing Carl in such deep thought, none of the people present dared to disturb him. Set the time 7 days earlier. I don't want to run into another group of time variance authority agents. Emma immediately started the operation. Done. Excellent. Carl looked around and handed the 3 agent uniforms to Emma and the others. Emma, Salvador, Amanda, the 3 of you put on these agent uniforms, just in case. Okay. The 3 quickly returned from the room dressed in agent uniforms. Under Carl's orders, they were fully armed, and Carl even gave them the elimination sticks that could erase them. As for the living room, Carl cleared out a large space. Very well, Emma, open the portal. Under the slightly nervous gaze of everyone present, Emma pressed the time controller. A portal radiating golden light opened up. Although everyone present had seen it through Emma's memories, they were still extremely shocked when they actually saw the portal appear, even more surprised than when they first saw Carl's ability, because behind this door lay other worlds and universes. Carl also stood slightly nervously in front of the portal. He didn't rashly use himself to test what was outside that large door. Instead, he first took out one of his business cards, threw it in, and the moment the card touched the portal, it vanished. Then, Carl immediately entered a hypersensory state and activated his perception of the spatial magic on that business card. The result made him slightly happy. Because he could perceive the spatial magic he had sent through behind this portal. Next, spatial magic began to emanate from Carl's entire body. His goal was simple. He wanted to try and see if he could use his spatial magic to open a door connecting two universes without relying on the time controller. The space in front of Carl began to twist, spin, and surge. This was a sign that a portal was beginning to open. But Carl's happiness lasted less than 3 seconds before the twisting and spinning disappeared. Did it fail? This was the first time Carl's spatial magic had encountered failure. However, this was within Carl's expectations. If his spatial magic could open a portal connecting two universes, that would indeed be a bit too monstrous. Then only one final experiment remained. Emma, close the portal. By this point, even Amanda and Salvador could roughly understand what Carl was doing. Still, it was as expected. After Emma closed the portal, Carl immediately lost the sensation of the coordinates leading to the other universe. That's enough. You can put it away for now. How did it go? Raven asked with concern. It's about what I expected. Carl said, looking at everyone while deep in thought. After the previous experiments, I've confirmed my general plan. First, no matter what those unknown universes are, we must explore them. This is for myself, and for our future. Everyone understood Carl's meaning. According to the information Emma obtained through telepathy, Carl was the time variant of their universe, and the time variance authority definitely wouldn't let him go. Of course, they also didn't want to tragically die according to the timeline of their original space-time. And as you saw, at least judging from the 3 agents who came to capture me, without this equipment, they are just ordinary people. Especially against Emma's telepathic ability, they have little resistance. Of course, I don't rule out that they will later send people who can resist Emma's ability, but for now, if you have these 3 sets of equipment, at the very least, you can withstand the power of the time controllers held by those agents, preventing you from being captured without a fight. Having said this, Carl announced his final decision. Therefore, my plan is this. Moving forward, Emma, Salvador, and Amanda, you will continue wearing this equipment, guarding this location, holding the time controllers, and preparing to receive us. Raven and I will go explore the unknown universe. The reason I'm doing this is simple. The previous experiment confirmed that although separated by a universe, my perception of my magic still exists. So, if you encounter danger, you just need to open the portal, and I will immediately perceive it and return. Then how will we know when you want to return? Emma asked. That's simple. Time. This machine is a time controller, which means you can freely adjust the time and location of the portal opening. Since we can determine both the location and the time, like now, Raven and I will enter the portal you just opened to explore that world. As long as we return to the arrival location at a fixed time 7 days later, theoretically, no matter when you open the portal to that specific time point and location, you should be able to receive us. Everyone present's eyes lit up. At this moment, Salvador suddenly spoke up. But Carl, you are that time variant. What if you go to that world and also affect that world's timeline? Then we'll never be able to find you. It was Emma who answered Salvador's question. Then there is only one way. After Carl and Raven arrive in that new world, they must only be visitors and cannot affect that world's timeline. After a day of preparation, everyone returned to the villa on St. Helena Island. Of course, Carl was the one who did most of the preparing. When he came back, everyone saw him carrying 3 bulging duffel bags. Amid the group's puzzlement, Carl unzipped the bags. Two were crammed with every sort of firearm, and the third held US dollars, gold, food, water, and clothes. We don't know what we'll face in whichever world we land, so weapons keep us safe, cash and gold keep us from sleeping in the streets, food keeps us from starving, and clothes keep us warm. Once again, Raven felt the kind of security she'd never known before meeting Carl. So when do you leave? Right now. But set our arrival a few days earlier. If the TVA can monitor this time controller, I don't want to walk into an ambush. Okay, how many days head start? 10. And to avoid any unknown time dilation issues, unless something goes wrong, open the portal at the exact same moment 10 days from now. No problem. At that, Emma produced a mechanical watch and fastened it on Carl's wrist, then jotted a string of special numbers on a slip of paper and handed it to Raven. What's this? The spatial coordinates for our timeline. If you run into trouble and can't get back on schedule, there's one last resort. Turn that world upside down. The TVA agents will come for you. Deal with them, take their time controller, key in these coordinates, and you can open your own way home. Saying that, Emma glanced at Carl, then looked back at Raven and added suddenly. But I hope you never have to. Remember what I told you. No matter what you see, don't affect that world's development. I don't want to die. Raven was shaken by Emma's grave tone. Carl, watching Emma hesitate, realized she must know something about the world they were heading to, but he asked no questions. Wish you both the best of luck. Hand in hand, Carl and Raven stepped through the portal with slight anticipation. In an instant they arrived in a new realm. Behind them the portal winked shut. A forest stretched before their eyes. The air carried the mingled scent of damp earth and green leaves. In the distance rose a tall mountain. Carl checked the watch. 10 days hence, at this exact hour, he had to be back here. Today was day 1. He reached out with his senses. His dropped business card was nowhere to be found. The realization struck him. 3 days from now, would another portal open here to deliver that card? And if he stepped back through at that moment, would he see another version of himself on the far side? According to the TVA handbook he'd read, as long as the slope, the ripple, he and Raven created stayed shallow, the timeline would not branch. Even if it did, Emma's last resort remained, but caution was still wise. While Carl brooded, Raven, equal parts thrilled and tense, gazed at the familiar scenery and asked uncertainly. So, we're really in a new universe. That was why Carl hadn't pressed Emma for details. If this truly was the Logan world, Raven might grow through pain into the hero who could lead the mutants, Mystique. That fit Carl's long-term plan. Looks that way, he answered lightly. What do we do now? I need a place to stash these weapons for later, then we find people and figure out what this universe is about. All right. Carl soon located a hidden cave in the foothills. Confirming that his spatial magic still worked, he stored every firearm inside, marked the spot with spatial coordinates, and set off toward the setting sun. Before long they spotted a road. After 10 minutes of walking, a pickup rolled up and an old woman leaned out. Young folks, need a ride. Across barren badlands an old Toyota Tacoma kicked up dust along the highway. Inside the 5-seat cab scratchy jazz played. An elderly couple occupied the front seats. In back sat a chubby boy plus the newly boarded Carl and Raven. Thanks so much, sir, ma'am. My girlfriend and I planned this sweet road trip, then our car died. We'd have been stranded without you. Ah, to be young. Lawrence and I drove the whole US, Canada, Mexico when we were your age. I can tell, Mrs. Lawrence, you must have been a real beauty. Haha, those days are gone. He puts up with me now, that's plenty. Hey now, darling, you'll always look like the first day I saw you. HMPH. So where are you kids from? New York. I live in Brooklyn. You've come a long way. Yeah, we wanted one last adventure before the wedding. Things go wrong, but nothing we can't handle. While Carl chatted with the couple, Raven kept staring at the chubby boy, more precisely, at the odd device in his hands that was playing TV. She burned with curiosity but dared not ask. The boy noticed her gaze. After a moment he offered. Want to play with the phone? Phone. Raven looked puzzled, but Carl cut in. Sorry, our phone's broken. I've got one if you need to call for help. No, thanks. Just drop us in town. Sure thing. Raven swallowed her excitement, and 5 long hours later a small town finally appeared. Carl and Raven thanked the kind couple and stepped out. Only then did Raven burst out, "Can we get one of those phone things? Why? That device can look up all kinds of information, maybe it'll tell us what we need." "Okay, but first let's find somewhere to stay, it'll be dark soon." Night fell. In a room of the small inn, Raven watched the neon-drenched town outside the window, equal parts tense and expectant. The unfamiliar setting didn't bother her much. Because, honestly, it looked almost the same as the world she'd come from. It felt as though, even after nearly half a century, the US hadn't changed at all. Yet, perhaps it was only her imagination, but Raven sensed an underlying filth and lifelessness oozing from this world. Just then the door swung open and Carl walked in, a backpack slung over his shoulder. Raven lit up as if she'd seen daylight itself and rushed forward for an enthusiastic hug. "Did you get that thing called a phone? Not just a phone, I even got something called a computer." As he spoke, Carl pulled a brand new iPhone and MacBook out of the bag he'd just bought. Raven excitedly grabbed the phone and began using it with practiced ease. Carl stared in surprise. Raven, rather pleased, explained, "I watched that chubby kid for 5 hours, already figured out how this thing works." She deftly unlocked the screen and opened an app, only to be disappointed by what appeared. Why? Faced with the 404 not found page, she looked utterly lost. Fortunately, Carl had an answer. "You need the internet." He showed her how to connect the phone to Wi-Fi. He hadn't bothered with a SIM card, unsure of this world's tech level. If it could track or eavesdrop, it would only mean trouble. The moment Raven learned to get online and opened the browser, Carl suddenly clamped a hand over hers. Under her curious gaze, he said slowly, "Promise me, whatever you see, stay calm." An ominous premonition flashed through Raven's mind. Sure enough, when Carl removed his hand, Raven tentatively typed, "mutant," into the search bar, and the first headline made her eyes widen in disbelief. Extinction of mutants. Frantically she entered the name Charles Xavier. The news that popped up next turned her face deathly pale. Charles Xavier, mutant leader known as Professor X, caused 600 casualties in the Westchester incident 1 year ago. 7 mutants died, including the X-Men we all knew. Raven opened the article and scrolled to the photos. Right on the front page, a white-haired Charles, now one of America's top 10 most wanted fugitives. Next came the dead X-Men. Most she didn't recognize, except one she could never forget. Hank. No, no, no. Unable to contain her grief, Raven burst into tears, her power slipped, and her skin reverted to its natural blue. Scrolling further she read, "Mutants are a thing of the past. Earth has seen no new mutants for 25 years. Humanity has one final victory. The Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters lies in ruins." Never had Raven imagined she'd arrived in so hopeless a world. She began searching every familiar name. Yet each result was either deceased or missing. Eric, Sean, Alex. Raven's whole body began to tremble. Seeing this, Carl seized her hand to stop her searching, then pulled her tightly into his arms. She tried to struggle, but his overwhelming strength held her still. Gradually she stopped resisting, her sobs growing heavier. Carl could only caress her head gently, soothing her until she calmed. After an unknown span of time Raven finally steadied herself and asked in a low voice. "Did Emma already know, and that's why she warned me?" "Most likely." Raven broke free from Carl's embrace, her gaze sharpening. In that instant Carl could sense Raven had truly grown up. "What do we do next?" Carl gave his answer. "We can't let our world follow this one's fate. We have to use whatever edge this future timeline offers. Next, I need you to learn this laptop. It's like the phone, only more powerful. Use it and the internet to download as much tech data as possible, anything a century ahead of our world, plus everything about mutant crises. Meanwhile I'll handle some matters. Tomorrow at dawn we leave." Seeing worry flash in Raven's eyes, Carl added, "I have a feeling Charles might still be alive." That entire night, Raven worked as if tireless. Once Carl taught her the computer, she began downloading scientific papers and looking up every catastrophe mutants had suffered in this world. The more she searched, the angrier she became. That single night inflicted more pain than she'd felt in her 20-odd years. Her heart hardened fast, the once naive college girl swiftly morphing into the cold, ruthless Mystique. Carl didn't rest either, he went off to handle something else. He had confirmed that the US dollars he'd brought from 1962 could still be spent in 2029, but large amounts would draw unwanted attention. So he had to find a place to exchange for current-era cash. Besides, the outdated weapons he'd carried were no longer up to the task. Since he'd come to the future, he might as well take full advantage. Luckily, America is never short of gun stores. He traded every ounce of gold he carried for an arsenal of new firearms. This was the US-Canada border. The whole process proved effortless. Finally he got hold of a second-hand pickup truck. At daybreak, everything packed, Carl and Raven set off. Where to? Raven no longer needed to ask, a whole night online had given her a thorough map of this world. Caliban, the mutant who could track other mutants, was no secret on the internet. A simple search was all it took. According to online reports, the man was somewhere along the US-Mexico border. Which meant the two of them would now have to drive clear across the states, from the northern to the southern frontier. Yet finding Charles wasn't Carl's true objective. He wanted Caliban because, while combing through data last night, he'd stumbled upon something intriguing. The photos of this world's X-Men online showed they were the cast from the original X-Men trilogy, not the Days of Future Past reboot timeline. One photo in particular caught his eye. It was of Phoenix, Jean Grey Tilda. Yes, this world's Jean Grey wasn't the new timeline's Dark Phoenix. More importantly, at least in news reports prior to last year's Westchester incident, Jean had never lost control, something crucial. Because it meant Jean Grey might still be alive. Charles's telepathy was formidable, enough to wipe out most of the X-Men, but it absolutely did not include the Phoenix-empowered Phoenix. The drive from the Mega border to the Mimo border is no short hop. The straight line distance alone tops 4,000 kilometers, and by road it's even farther. Even if Carl and Raven kept the pedal down 24 hours a day, they'd still need at least 3 days. Fortunately, the return trip will be easy. New universe or not, Carl hasn't forgotten what he's best at. Whenever they stop for a break he plants more coordinates across the world, adding another layer of safety for himself here. Raven, meanwhile, stays wound-tight, glued to her phone, devouring every scrap of information about this world. Before they left, Carl had scored a pair of SIM cards for their phones. It lets Raven keep digging online even from the passenger seat. Carl hadn't wanted to, first, because the news here could shatter her even faster, second, because it's 2029, not 1962, and a SIM is a glowing beacon. Luckily, border zones mean fewer cameras. He also worries about remote mutant detectors, something like the Sentinels, but so far the journey's been quiet. So they drive through the first day without pause. The second day slips past. By the third night Raven wants to push on, but Carl stops her. This hopeless world has already kept her awake for 48 hours straight. Carl's body can shrug it off, Raven's can't. Her power only slows aging, it hasn't boosted her stamina. I know you're in a hurry, Raven, but you need sleep. She starts to protest. Carl simply wraps her in his arms and meets her eyes with quiet tenderness. The look silences her. They check into a roadside motel. Side by side on the narrow bed, Carl cradles her like a father easing a child into dreams. He chose right. That night she clings to him so tightly he feels how starved she is for safety. Dawn of the third day arrives. After a quick tidy up they roll on toward the US-Mexico border. They're entering the more crowded states now. Cameras start to appear. For caution's sake Carl has Raven switch faces. Online clues suggest this world's Mystique is the older version too, but better safe than sorry. A full night's rest has loosened the knots in her nerves. So this universe might not mirror ours exactly. He explains the likelihood while coaxing her into a human disguise. Right. Apart from Logan looking the same, the photos prove the rest diverge. I've no idea how Charles and Eric will age, but definitely not into those faces. Raven nods. She can find scarcely a trace of Charles or Eric in the aged images of Professor X and Magneto. Which means there could be another me out there. Carl nods, then offers the bleaker possibility. If she's still alive. The web carries only fragments about the Westchester incident, they can't learn which 7 mutants died. And with mutants now nearly extinct, the Brotherhood of Mutants under Eric's command is almost certainly gone as well. The thought darkens Raven's gaze even further. Carl lets go of the wheel with one hand and closes it gently over hers. We're here to keep our world from sharing this fate. Strength flickers back into Raven's eyes. Their plan looks solid. Keep this pace and by tomorrow morning they should reach the border and the mutant called Caliban. But something, neither wholly unexpected nor truly surprising, shifts their course. Fourth afternoon. A highway outside the city. Honk honk honk. Horns blare without pause. Engines roar, curses fly. Traffic jam. Raven finds the chaos almost unbearable. Cars clogged U.S. roads in 63-2, but this restless, irritable crush makes her snap. I hate this world. Carl takes it in stride. He lived through worse gridlock in his previous life. What now? We wait. Only day 4, we still have 6 left. With nothing else to do, Raven dives back into her phone, studying the world. Then Carl spots something wrong. A swarm of drones sweeps across the sky ahead. The machine sees everyone's gaze at once. What's going on? Drivers shout. A scream cuts the air, carrying a word both Carl and Raven know too well. Impossible. Mutants. Watch out. Boom. Explosions and shrieks erupt up the road. Through the windshield they see mutant children sprinting between the lanes, drones overhead, a heavy armored truck and 4 army jeeps closing in from the scrub. Raven's pupils shrink. Her fists clench, body shaking as she forces herself to stay still. She knows that to get home she and Carl must do nothing, yet how can she stand idle while mutant kids run for their lives? Tears brim in her eyes. Then Carl's gentle voice drifts to her ear. Looks like we're making a scene. She whips around, staring at him with disbelief and a softness he's never seen. Carl, we can't. Shish. He strokes her cheek. If we walk away, you'll regret it forever. Tears spill. In that instant she knows she loves him. No time to waste. Keys, take them. He points past the lone armored truck and single jeep. Grab the kids, head for the forest. I'll handle pursuit. With that he steps out, right hand clawing empty air, an RPG-7 materializes in his grip. Boom. On the left side of the road, an armored vehicle drove across the wilderness. Donald Pierce, leader of the Raiders, glared with hatred at the children fleeing in vehicles. Ever since that woman named Jean Grey released these children 3 days ago, trouble had come knocking. As a cyborg who hated mutants, he naturally didn't care about the lives of these mutant children. But as valuable company property, Donald Pierce couldn't just execute them outright. However, it didn't matter, now they had nowhere left to run. Admittedly, that troublesome woman named Jean Grey was smart. She knew X-23 was the company's priority, so she split up and escaped with X-23. But she had still underestimated the organization's power. Just a bunch of kids, even if they had special abilities, so what? Without hesitation, he lifted his walkie-talkie and issued the order. Get ready. Once we're somewhere secluded, capture them alive. Right then, Donald Pierce, sitting in the passenger seat, suddenly felt a surge of unease. A whistling roar followed, and without a second thought, the instincts honed over years as a mercenary kicked in. He shoved open the passenger door and jumped. Boom. Flames swallowed the armored vehicle whole, the violent explosion flipping the entire chassis. In the congested lane, the mutant children who had escaped from Mexico's Akali Institute hid themselves among the traffic, fleeing desperately. Although they were very young, raised as weapons from birth, they knew exactly how to evade the raiders. They had to use ordinary human vehicles to block the raiders' line of sight, then find a chance to escape into the forest. The problem? Raiders in off-road vehicles watched from both sides, and drones hovered overhead. What do we do? They didn't know, they could only wait for an opportunity. Suddenly, a violent explosion drew everyone's attention. 11 children stared in shock at the blast. The raiders' armored vehicle had been blown away. What's going on? The children still hadn't figured out what was happening. Another whistling sound. A second rocket shot out, striking a military jeep beside the armored vehicle. Although the raiders in the jeep had time to jump clear, the vehicle still became a heap of burning scrap. As the children wondered who was helping them, a distant voice called out. Over here, get in, quick. The children looked up and saw a blonde woman waving at them. Beside her, a man held a rocket launcher. The children instantly realized who was helping them, yet they still hesitated. After so much abuse, they were wary of ordinary humans. But the next moment made their eyes widen. The blonde woman's skin rippled like waves, shifting into a form no mutant could ever forget. Out in the wilderness, Donald Pierce climbed out from the blast wave and saw this. His pupils shrank. Impossible. Mutants. Mutants. I know her, Mystique. At that moment, the entire road erupted. Countless people raised their phones to record. Not only mutants and raiders recognized Raven, ordinary humans did too. In this world, Mystique's fame was simply that immense. She was arguably the fourth most renowned mutant in human society, after Charles, Eric, and Logan. Her power was just that dangerous. Compared to ordinary humans' fear, the mutant children saw hope and rushed over. Raven herself was nervous. This was the first time she had revealed her true form in front of so many ordinary humans. But a single word of praise from Carl swept all her tension away. Cool. As expected, shape-shifting really was the coolest. The children finally reached them, wanting to say so much, but Carl refused to waste time. Mercenaries were already charging over with loaded rifles. Get in, boys in back, girls up front. Hurry. Without hesitation, the mutant children obeyed and climbed aboard. Raven stomped the accelerator and veered off the road, speeding toward the distant forest. Drones in the sky immediately gave chase. Carl was ready. He reached up and yanked out another rocket launcher. Boom. A violent blast sent the drones spinning. Watching the rockets streak past, raiders and children in the truck all stared wide-eyed. But that was only the beginning. Carl tossed the rocket launcher back into the portal, and an M60 general-purpose machine gun, the same one Rambo had wielded in First Blood, appeared, spitting tongues of fire that kicked dirt everywhere. The raiders had no time to prepare. Except for the cyborg Donald Pierce, whose reflexes were fast enough to duck behind a burning vehicle, every other raider was riddled with holes. While the others merely swept the ground once, the raiders immediately hid behind vehicles on the road, not daring to show even a hair. Meanwhile, Donald Pierce, cowering behind the burning vehicle, cursed as he scrambled and grabbed his comm, calling for backup. Who is this mutant? Why don't we have any intel on him? He had just finished speaking when a crisp sound rang out. A silver-white grenade bounced and rolled right up to him. Donald Pierce's pupils shrank, a flicker of fear finally crossing his face, but it was too late. Boom. The world spun. Donald Pierce saw only white, ears ringing. Through the haze, a massive shadow loomed over him, raising a long blade. I like your arm. U.S.-Mexico border. Not long ago, a strange woman had asked him to take her to Canada. Now, puzzled, Wolverine returned to the place he called home. Living there with him were Charles, already stricken with Alzheimer's, and Caliban, who could track mutants. The aging Wolverine had just given Charles his medicine and put him to bed, and was eating with Caliban and chatting when a sudden news flash on television caught their eyes. CNN breaking news. Moments ago, the mutants we had all but forgotten carried out a horrific terror attack on U.S. soil. Among the two leading mutants, one is a former X-Man codenamed Mystique, the other is undocumented, but clearly devastating. This assault has thrust the long-forgotten terror of mutants back into the public debate. Seeing Raven on the screen, the footage shot by a phone. Both Wolverine and Caliban's pupils contracted. Wolverine remembered all too well. Mystique had died in the incident caused by Professor X. Caliban looked as if he'd seen a ghost. Impossible, there's no mutant on Earth I don't know. The screen soon showed Carl, Gatling in hand, suppressing the entire area with gunfire. Finally, after severing the arm of an old acquaintance of Logan's, he opened a portal and vanished on the spot. The newscast continued. Eyewitnesses report this was a premeditated mutant terror strike. Many saw at least 14 mutant children. Confirmed fatalities already exceed 20. The TV showed phone footage of a departing pickup filled with children. At the sight, Wolverine instantly thought of the strange woman he'd met earlier. He didn't understand what was happening, but he stood up at once and, under Caliban's puzzled gaze, walked out. United States, Colorado. Deep in dense forest, a pickup raced along. Only when the path ended did it stop beneath concealing shade. In the driver's seat, Raven nervously scanned the sky. She wasn't sure whether drones were still pursuing them. A little girl's voice came from behind her. They didn't follow. The speaker was a tall, blonde white girl in the passenger seat. How do you know? The girl gazed at Raven in admiration. I can sense every living thing within 10 kilometers, that's my power. Raven understood, stroked the child's hair, exhaled in relief, and stepped out of the truck. The other children followed, all staring at Raven with wonder. Raven smiled gently. What's your name? X2. X2. The designation made Raven pause. X2 glanced at the others. We were all weapons made in Mexico's Akali Institute. We have no names, only numbers and code names. X2 is my serial, and my codename is Ghost. Raven shuddered as the children introduced themselves one by one. X3. I control earth and stone, codename Colossus. X4. I control plants, codename Thorn. X7. I generate lightning, codename Lightning. X8. I create ice, codename Ice Maiden. X9. I control minds, codename Puppet. X10. I have telekinesis, codename Doppelganger. X11. I command wind, codename Storm. X13. I emit sonic screams, codename Banshee. X15. I fire shock waves, codename Impact. X17. I manipulate fire, codename Match. X18. I can turn transparent, codename Phantom. X21. I have telekinesis, codename Sprite. X22. I grow extra bone blades, codename Bone Spike. The film only gave 3 or 4 kids powers, the rest are my own additions. When the roll call ended, little X2, Ghost, stepped forward, nervous and eager. You're really Mystique. Meeting their eyes, Raven shifted into her true blue form, thrilling the children, who crowded around her. It really is you. Mama Jean Grey told us stories about you. The X-Men. Heroes of the mutants. Did you come to save us? Raven had never imagined her original shape could inspire such hope in young mutants. At that moment she knew what she had to do. She knelt and asked gently. Easy, one at a time. What did you mean by the Akali Institute and Mama Jean Grey? And you said you were made. Though none looked older than 10 or so, the children spoke with grim maturity. The Akali Institute in Mexico is a lab. With no mutants left in the world, Dr. Reese wanted to harness mutant power, so they cloned us from collected mutant genes. Mama Jean Grey is the scientist who made us, but she was kind, she set us free because we refused to fight. The Institute decided we were useless and ordered us terminated. Mama Jean Grey knew their target is X-23, so she took X-23 herself and split off from us to draw the raiders away. The raiders are Dr. Reese's dogs, they're hunting us. Listening to the children recount their past so calmly, Raven's heart clenched again. She longed to stay and protect them, and fury blazed within her at the Akali Institute. But she also knew she had already brought Carl too much trouble, perhaps enough to strand them forever in this world. Just then, to every child's astonishment, a portal opened before them. Carl stepped out. The children's eyes shone even brighter. None knew who this mutant was, yet the dazzling power and the ruthless slaughter he had unleashed to save them let their pent-up rage vent in pure exhilaration. These children, trained as living weapons, felt no mercy. Raven felt it too, but her heart was heavy with guilt. Sorry, Carl, if not for me. Carl was calm, even dismissive. No need to apologize, honestly, I saw this coming. Carl hadn't said it just to comfort Raven. He really didn't care that much about getting back. First, he was a transmigrator, every world felt the same to him, and a new one might even be more interesting. Second, knowing the Logan plot gave him plenty of prep for the move he'd just made. Lastly, the moment Emma mentioned there was a second way home, he realized his presence might already be irreversibly changing this world. Raven, of course, didn't know any of this. She thought Carl was simply comforting her, and it moved her even more. Before this, although they'd already slept together, it had only been because Carl connected with her on a mental level, understanding and accepting her. She'd never imagined a real future with him, just a physical fling. After all, Carl never hid his wandering eye, but now she found she didn't care. As long as she could stay beside him, she felt safe and content. At this moment, Raven saw only Carl. Carl naturally noticed Raven's gaze. He had to admit, that look was lethal. Carl stroked her cheek. If there hadn't been kids around, he would have kissed her right then. All right, I'm here. Don't worry. Even without the second way Emma told us about, some things I've discovered in this world might still help us get back. Raven didn't ask more, she simply nodded. Then she too looked at the curious kids. What do we do now? Raven asked, filling Carl in on everything she'd just learned. Carl studied the children for a moment. I'm Carl Lance. As you can see, I'm a mutant. So, kids, what are your plans? Any place to go? The girl codenamed Ghost stepped forward at once. Can we come with you? The boy codenamed Colossus said. Mama Jean Grey told us an address, there's a shelter for mutants. May I see it? Of course. Colossus pulled an X-Men comic from his backpack, flipped to the inside of the back cover, and pointed to a set of coordinates. Carl compared them to the road map in the car and broke into a delighted grin. What is it? Lucky, it looks like the very place we came from. Carl now realized their arrival point must be the site of Logan's final battle and Logan's grave. Raven's face lit up, then twisted in puzzlement. But we didn't see any shelter there. Carl closed the comic and handed it back to Colossus. Probably because we just didn't find it. Carl made up his mind on the spot, looking at Raven and the kids. Looks like our plan changes. We can't go looking for Charles yet, we have to settle these kids first. That wasn't Carl's original plan. Originally, Raven would watch the children while he went after Charles alone. And with no one tagging along, he could squeeze in something fun. Like raiding a few 2029-era U.S. arms depots to restock his warehouse. After all, 2029 firepower packed far more punch than 1962 hardware. But he had to scrap that idea fast. Among the gear stripped from the raiders he'd taken down, he found anti-mutant tech. One item looked like a collar. Carl didn't dare clasp it round his own neck, for all he knew it had remote shutdown. He merely triggered it in midair and sensed a unique magnetic field scrambling his powers. That single test flipped his priorities. Carl loved risk, but only when the payoff dwarfed the cost. Just like this jaunt across parallel timelines. Next to his life, those shiny new guns suddenly looked cheap. Raven knew none of this, yet she agreed. Right now the kids mattered more than finding Charles. So we head out now. Yep. Carl sliced the air, a portal yawned open. Raven instantly called to the excited kids. All right, pack up and follow me. Once Raven led the children through, Carl drove the car in after them. Thus, on the fourth day, Carl and Raven returned to where they'd started. And Carl spotted something that made his expression turn odd. Raven noticed at once. After settling the kids, she walked over. What's wrong, Carl? Carl stayed silent, stepped aside, crouched, and picked up a business card from the ground. It read, Carl Lance, Lance Publishing Group. Raven saw it too and remembered its origin. In the original timeline, on this very day, Carl had tossed it in while first testing the time manager. Yet if saving these mutant kids had altered the timeline, why was the card still here? But if we've saved the kids, we should have nudged the world onto a different path. So why did this card still appear? Meeting Raven's puzzled look, Carl admitted he didn't know. Maybe saving them didn't affect the timeline, those kids were meant to be here anyway. Or maybe something else is going on. Either way, it's good news, we don't have to worry about being stuck. Raven exhaled in relief, the weight slid off her heart. She'd feared her actions might strand them forever. All right, let's take care of the kids first. You stay here with them, I'll scout around for that shelter. Raven nodded, but the kids piped up. We want to help too. We're not little kids. Seeing these precocious children, Carl brightened and divided them up. All right, safety first. We split into 4-man teams. Ghost, you take Ice Maiden, Sprite, and Lightning, stay in the car, guard the 3 little ones and watch the perimeter with your power. Colossus, you head west with Impact, Banshee, and Doppelganger. Thorn, you go north with Storm, Bone Spike, and Match. Raven, take Phantom and Puppet south, I'll check the east. Move out. He picked the 3 oldest looking kids as team leaders. After that he pulled out 4 daggers and 4 flare guns, handing them to the captains, Ghost, Colossus, Thorn, and Raven. Keep these. Wherever you are, I'll sense you. Spot anything, signal the others. You know how to use them. The kids gripped guns and blades, nodding in excitement. The Native American girl, Thorn, asked eagerly. So are we X-Men now? That caught Carl and Raven off guard. But looking at the thrilled kids, Carl, suddenly inspired, smiled and said, maybe we need something cooler. How about X-Force? Mexico. Akali Institute. With the roar of rotor blades, a helicopter descended from the sky. The owner of this place, Dr. Reese, who had wiped out every mutant on Earth with bio-gene tech, was already waiting. As soon as the helicopter touched down, a medical team rushed out with a stretcher. Dr. Reese smoothed wind-tangled hair and watched the Raiders' leader, Donald Pierce, carried toward him, brows knitting tight. The man was a wreck, burned to the bone, reeking of roast flesh, his cybernetic arm hacked clean off. His gaze turned dangerous. Looks like this new mutant is another deadly terrorist. Professor. Donald Pierce clawed Dr. Reese's sleeve with blood-slick fingers and snarled. Relax, Pierce. You're still useful, I won't let you die. However. Dr. Reese studied the charred, barely human ruin and spoke slowly. This time, you'll need a full-body rebuild. No problem, cough, Professor. Just let me kill that fool, any cost. Vengeance burned in Pierce's eyes. Good. Hold on, and I'll give you the power to kill that mutant yourself. He waved the medics over. Take him inside. Opportunity. Initiate Project X0. Dr. Reese wiped blood from his hands with a handkerchief, disgust twisting his face. Still, it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. As heir to the old Weapon X program, Dr. Reese knew its secrets. Including the creature he coveted, a near-immortal hybrid of impossible abilities. Once designated X11, now code-named X0. Before, the brass had refused him, claiming mutants were extinct. Now a fresh mutant threat had Washington spooked. And Mystique's appearance thrilled him even more. Because, beyond X0, he knew files on the Sentinel program. Lucky day. He tossed the bloodied handkerchief and strode toward the Akali base. He no longer cared about X23 or X24. Compared to those half-finished toys, X0 and the Sentinel project were all he wanted. US-Canada border. Colossus's X-Force found the refuge without effort. After Carl christened them X-Force, the young mutants cheered, the name stuck. But the refuge disappointed them. A cliff-top ruin, long abandoned, the children's faces fell. There's no refuge. Impossible, Mama Jean Grey wouldn't lie. Raven hugged the crestfallen kids. Don't worry, Carl and I are still here. The children brightened. Yes, beside them stood Mystique, mutant warrior and hero. And Mr. Carl Lance, the powerful mutant who'd saved them from raiders. What now? What now? Colossus, now team captain, asked eagerly. Raven looked to Carl. The kids understood. Carl was in charge. Don't worry, Raven and I won't let anyone hurt you. Carl soothed them, then surveyed the ruins. You've run long enough. Rest tonight, tomorrow we'll see. Raven, take the little ones inside. Ghost, Colossus, Thorn, scout for supplies. I'll bring the truck through the portal. On it. They split up. When Carl drove the truck up through the portal, Ghost shouted, Mr. Carl, Miss Raven, there's a radio. An unexpected gift. Inside the watchtower-like shack sat a dusty radio, a small generator, and a stack of X-Men comics. Once, Carl would have scoffed. Now, after ferrying kids across worlds, he knew the comics mattered. Sure enough, inside the comics he found coordinates and a time window. Raven, fetch a jerry can of gas, I think I've found where to take the kids. Raven's eyes lit up. Soon she returned with fuel. Carl tuned the radio. Luckily, it wasn't high-tech, just a World War II-era relic. Probably left here to avoid tracking. Carl poured gas, the generator coughed to life, lights flickered on, radio dials glowed. What time is it? Raven checked her phone. 4:30. Carl's watch showed another world's time. Perfect. We're lucky. Because the comics said, noon to 5. So, with the kids watching, Carl sat at the radio, dialed the frequency, 63. Hello, hello, come in, please. Static crackled. Raven and the kids held their breath, they knew what Carl was doing. Hello, hello, anyone there? Static hissed. Carl kept calling, but no one answered. Faces fell as 4:30 ticked toward 5 o'clock. Suddenly, a cold female voice broke through. This is Eden, who are you? At this moment, the previously silent room was filled with the children's cheers, and Raven's face also showed a relieved smile. Seeing this, Carl replied. My name is Carl. I'm currently in a shelter near the border of the United States and Canada. I found this radio here. I'm with a group of children who just escaped from the Akali Institute. I need to find a place that can accommodate them. After listening to Carl's account, there was a brief silence from the radio, then two impatient questions were asked. Are you the mutant who appeared in the news today? Is the mutant next to you? Raven, Mystique. It's already in the news. Yes. Even in the United States of 2029, there couldn't be internet in border areas, so Carl naturally didn't know that he and Raven had made headlines. However, just as he was about to answer, the woman on the radio said anxiously. No time left. After 5 o'clock, human satellites can track the radio signal. Contact me on time at 2 p.m. tomorrow. With that, a click of the radio being turned off was heard. Seeing this, Carl could only raise an eyebrow, put down the receiver, and looked at the excited children. Looks like we're in luck. Alright, we'll rest here tonight. Raven, there's still some food in the car. Get it out, we're having a bonfire party. The children's eyes lit up again. Having been trained as weapons since childhood, they had never experienced the joy that children should have. Raven didn't refuse either. No problem. At this moment, the boy codenamed Colossus reminded them. We'd better not eat the food from the supermarket. Why? Raven was a little puzzled. Shadow answered. We heard from Mother Jean Grey that the Akali Institute, through genetic modification technology, altered certain ingredients in the food we eat and the drinks we consume, eliminating the X gene in newborn mutants. That's why no mutant children have appeared in 25 years. At this moment, Raven's body trembled again, her eyes filled with uncontrollable anger. It was Carl who patted her shoulder, steadying her. Wild animals aren't affected, right? That's good then. Night fell. The sky was dotted with stars, and the Milky Way was clearly visible. A bonfire party was being held at the shelter on the cliff. A butchered wild boar was being roasted over the bonfire, emitting an alluring aroma. Next to it, there were some snacks, fruits, and drinks. These foods were all brought by Carl from his original world. Carl sat beside them, holding a dagger, cutting off the roasted meat from the wild boar, and distributing it to each child's bowl. The taste of roast meat, which they had never tasted since childhood, made the children eat with greasy mouths. The children were also very good at reciprocating. The Ice Maiden, who had freezing abilities, gave Carl a frozen cola. Thank you. The little girl was very happy, and everyone was enjoying themselves. Raven, surrounded by the children, also happily watched this scene. Even by the bonfire, the night was still a bit chilly, so Raven gently draped blankets over the children. So, can we leave here tomorrow? The little girl with an indigenous American face, codenamed Thorn, asked. By this point, through mutual understanding, Carl also knew why the children's ethnicities were so complex and why there were so few Caucasians, because their mothers were all immigrants from Mexico. Apparently, the Akali Institute didn't dare to cultivate clones from Caucasian women. Of course, tomorrow we can contact that place called Eden, and they can take care of you. As the oldest boy here, Colossus said with some hesitation. If they can't take care of us. Shadow also spoke up. We want to follow you. Compared to the unknown Eden, Carl and Raven were clearly more trusted by the children. Carl saved them, and Raven was a mutant warrior and hero, Mystique. This made Raven's gaze complex, she didn't know what to do for a moment. However, Carl looked at the children's eager eyes and suddenly had an idea, gently stroking Shadow's golden hair. Don't worry, if that place called Eden can't protect you, Raven and I can take you with us. At this, the children cheered happily. Raven was stunned, because she understood what Carl meant, taking these children to the world they came from. Was this a good idea? Raven didn't know, but she could only trust Carl's choice now. And at this moment, Carl had an idea and said. Code names sound too strange, and they're not names a child should have. If you don't mind, I'd like to give each of you a name. The children's eyes suddenly became even brighter. A name. I want a name. Like Laura. Looks like you have no objections. Carl thought for a moment, then first looked at the golden-haired Shadow. Shadow, I want to call you Emily. How do you like that name? Shadow, or rather, Emily, showed her undisguised affection in her eyes. I like this name. From today, I am Emily. Everyone enthusiastically called out Shadow's new name, Emily. Then Carl looked at Thorn. Thorn, how about the name Olivia? Thorn, or rather, Olivia, excitedly clenched her fists. I have my own name. I'm Olivia. Ice Maiden, Maya. Elf, Rani. Banshee, Eileen. Storm, Ella. Phantom, Luna. After naming the 7 girls, Carl then looked at the 6 boys. Colossus, Mason. Electro Man, Max. Puppet Man, Carson. Impact, Lucas. Match, Daniel. Bone Spike, Finn. Doppelganger, Noah. Now, all 14 children had their own names. This made the children, who had lived in laboratories since childhood and had never seen the outside world, feel a sense of their own existence. They excitedly called out each other's names, over and over again, as if they would never tire of it. Seeing this scene, Raven was the most moved. She even began to fantasize about how wonderful it would be if these children were hers and Carl's. Seeing this, Carl also recited the children's names individually, then casually asked a question. Who is this Laura you just mentioned? Time quickly arrived at 10 o'clock in the evening. After a joyful bonfire dinner, delicious barbecue, and having their own names, the children, unable to resist a day's fatigue, finally fell asleep. Raven, after ensuring all the children were asleep, returned to the watchtower. As Raven entered, she saw Carl sitting in a chair in front of the radio, holding a bottle of blue potion. Raven, of course, knew what this potion was. It was manufactured by Dr. Reese, the owner of the Akali Institute in this world, to enhance the abilities of these mutant children. The children took some with them when they escaped, and it was with the help of these potions that they managed to escape from the raiders until now. Do you want to try these potions? Raven was a little worried, as she knew Carl also wanted to improve his abilities. However, unexpectedly, Carl shook his head resolutely in response to her question. No. I wouldn't inject such inexplicable things into my body. Carl made no secret of his disdain for the potion, which utterly captivated Raven. She loved Carl's mature, rational, and restrained demeanor. After all, it didn't seem safe no matter how one looked at it. Carl immediately noticed the change in Raven's gaze. His desire stirred, and he patted his thigh at Raven. Raven instantly understood Carl's meaning, walked over charmingly, wrapped her arms around Carl's neck, and sat on his lap. Soon, amidst a series of low moans, the two deeply intertwined. Low groans slowly echoed throughout the watchtower. About half an hour later, Raven, who had transformed back into her blue-skinned form and was drenched in sweat, lay weakly on Carl's exposed chest. Yet, neither of them showed any signs of fatigue, reluctant to even separate slightly. Everything in this world over the past 5 days had been a bit suffocating for her. If Carl hadn't been there to support her, she probably would have collapsed long ago. Now, under Carl's impacts, which felt as if he wanted to devour her, Raven felt all her vexation being knocked away. Feeling completely relaxed, her thoughts became much clearer as she asked. Are you really planning to take these children back? Carl slowly stroked Raven's body, saying distractedly. That's the worst-case scenario. Let's see how things are tomorrow. Hopefully, that Eden can provide a safe haven for these children, and then we can return with peace of mind. Carl did have the idea of bringing these children to his world. After all, these children were trained as weapons from birth, and their potential abilities were vast and varied. With a little training, they could quickly grow to become his most loyal subordinates and strengthen his forces. However, he naturally couldn't tell Raven this, and he still needed to see the situation at Eden tomorrow. For Carl now, nothing was more anticipated than tomorrow. Raven, understanding, rubbed against Carl's chest, shifting to a more comfortable position, then stroked his chest. The room suddenly fell silent. Carl looked down and could clearly sense that Raven seemed to have something on her mind. What's wrong? Raven hesitated for a moment, then whispered. I'm a little worried about Charles and Logan. Through the children's explanations, Raven also learned about the special nature of the child named Laura. She was cloned by the Akali Institute based on Logan's cells, and Logan was the only recorded surviving X-Men in this world. Therefore, the woman named Jean Grey took X-23 to find Logan, hoping to get his help. After these few days of understanding the mutant history of this world, Raven fully realized how important Logan, this big, goofy guy she had only known for a few days but wasn't very familiar with, was to the future mutants. Almost without thinking, Raven could be sure that Charles was definitely with Logan. This meant that the woman going to find Logan would put Charles and Logan in a very dangerous situation. Especially with Charles's current terrible condition. Raven also knew that her words would put Carl in a dilemma, but she couldn't help but worry. Charles was like family to her, even if this was another universe. At this moment, Raven's words indeed made Carl fall into thought. To be honest, although he had come to this world, Carl didn't really want to meddle in its affairs. Because this world was different from almost all superhero worlds. This was a world full of despair. Death was liberation for everyone. Whether it was Logan, waiting for old man Logan to return home, or Professor X, suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And for Carl, the only two things he cared about in this world were the technology that surpassed his Earth by more than half a century, and the Phoenix Force within Jean Grey, whose survival was uncertain. However, Carl still showed concern for Raven's worries. Because Carl really liked the positive emotional feedback a woman could give a man when she loved him. So, since Raven had spoken, Carl had to consider it. It wasn't a big deal anyway. We'll see how things are tomorrow. If we can settle these children, we can go back and find Logan and Charles. Carl had a premonition that if there were any mutants left in this world, they should be in this place called Eden. And now, at night, in the dimly lit lighthouse, suppressed sounds of joy rose and fell. Fifth day, afternoon. After a day of rest and lunch, all the children were refreshed and came to the watchtower, waiting for 2 p.m. to arrive. However, compared to yesterday's tension and anticipation, the children were now completely relaxed. Even if there was nothing in this Eden, they were no longer worried about having nowhere to go. Because Carl and Raven had promised to take care of them. Beep beep beep. As the time reached 2 p.m., Carl once again called the unknown signal. Almost simultaneously, the clear, cold female voice rang out again. Static. Mr. Carl. It's me. I've confirmed your information through the news. Before we proceed with our conversation, there are a few things I need to confirm. First, can you confirm that your whereabouts have not been tracked? Carl was, of course, very confident about this. Don't worry, they won't be able to discover the existence of this sanctuary for a while. One of these children also possesses a similar sensory ability. Very well, then the second question, can I speak with Mystique who is with you? Carl looked back at the slightly surprised Raven. No problem. Carl quickly moved aside, and Raven picked up the microphone, saying nervously. Hello. The radio was silent for a moment, and after some static, it slowly spoke. Are you really Raven? Raven glanced back at Carl. She naturally understood what the other side was asking. Encouraged by Carl's gaze, she took a deep breath and said. It's me, but perhaps not the me you know. There was another moment of silence from the radio, then a voice with complex emotions spoke. Then do you know who I am? As Raven looked on in some confusion, a name echoed from the radio. I am Kitty, Kitty Pryde. As soon as this name was mentioned, everyone in the room, including Carl, immediately understood what it represented. Of course, this wasn't just because Carl was a transmigrator. Although Carl was a transmigrator, to be honest, after living in this world for so many years, he had almost forgotten the names of all the minor characters, except for the key figures. Of course, this was also because this was the world of the X-Men. If they mentioned the codename, Carl would instantly remember. For example, the woman on the other side of the radio now. Kitty Pryde, codename, Shadowcat. Image. That's right, she was the mutant who sent Logan's consciousness back to the past in Days of Future Past. And in the news of this world, the real names of some mutants in the X-Men were no secret. Carl's eyes suddenly lit up. Since even Kitty Pryde was alive, there seemed to be even less reason for the Jean Grey he was looking forward to have died. At this moment, Raven also replied. I know you, but only from seeing you in the news. The radio side was silent for a moment. I understand. Next, please write down this address coordinate. With that, a string of numbers rang out from the radio. Carl and Raven understood immediately that these should be the coordinates for Eden, located within Canada. Have you written them down? Yes. One more thing, we saw the abilities of Mr. Carl next to you on the news. His talent seems very similar to Clarice's. Raven was a little unfamiliar with the name. There were simply too many mutants in this world. Although Raven had read some news, the names of mutants other than those around Charles were vague to her. She could only look to Carl for help, only to find Carl frowning in thought. Fortunately, it only lasted for a moment. Yes, if you are referring to the female mutant codenamed Blink, my talent is indeed very similar to hers. I can open a portal connecting two locations. The voice from the radio became cold again. Are there any restrictions? I can only go to places I have already visited. Alright, you now have two choices. First, you take these children across the border, but I cannot guarantee safety. Second, you can wait 5 days. 5 days from now, around this time in the afternoon, we will have our own people at the border line who can let you pass. Will we be safe once we cross the border line? No. The Akali Institute's sphere of influence covers the US, Mexico, and Canada, but at least within Canada, they dare not send troops over. Speaking up to this point, the radio voice seemed to hesitate. In fact, the coordinates you saw are just a transfer station. The real Eden is not located there. At this moment, Carl suddenly understood something, and his eyes became interesting. He originally intended to say it out loud, but after thinking about it, he spoke to Raven. Raven, please take these children outside to play for a while. Raven was confused but nodded anyway. Under the children's strange gazes, she led them away from the observation tower. Only after the door closed did Carl ask Kitty Pryde on the radio. So, can I understand this to mean that the lady codenamed Blink is still alive? A burst of noisy electromagnetic sound came from the radio, as if it had suddenly gone silent, with no reply whatsoever. Seeing this, Carl became even more certain of his guess and continued to probe. Since the lady codenamed Blink is still alive, she should know where we are. Wouldn't it be more convenient to open a portal and take these children directly? At this moment, the electromagnetic sound rang out again, but the sound was no longer coming from the radio, but from behind Carl. As multicolored sparks flashed, a beautiful portal, shining with brilliant light, appeared before Carl. It must be said that this portal was much prettier than Carl's, but it seemed to be a completely different power from Carl's spatial magic. Carl couldn't feel the presence of any spatial magic within it. On the opposite side of the portal was a vast, empty space that looked like a cave. There was nothing else, but Carl still stepped inside. Because he was certain of one thing. As Carl stepped inside, what appeared before him was a huge, circular cave, but it looked incredibly dilapidated. The surrounding walls were covered with various broken metal plates and steel frames, and an overpass connected towards the direction of the entrance. Seeing this scene, Carl finally knew where he was. This should be where the X-Men once stored Cerebro, but now it had become a ruins. Just then, the metal plates on the surrounding walls suddenly began to move. Creak. Boom. These metal plates and steel crossbeams transformed into spikes, embedding themselves around Carl's body, forming a cage that tightly enclosed him. There was no need to guess who did this. Marvel's greatest showman, Magneto. Carl, however, remained calm. At the same time, a huge, silver-white circular iron plate flew over from the top of the cave. Standing on it were 3 people who were somewhat familiar yet surprising to Carl. They were familiar because the leader of the 3 was the one Carl had been longing for and his main objective this time, Phoenix, Jean Grey. To her right was Magneto, and to her left was Kitty Pryde. As for the surprise, although Carl had long anticipated that these X-Men would be quite old in this future world, the visible aging and desolation displayed by the 3 before him still greatly astonished Carl. There was no need to mention Magneto, who had white hair, wore a cloak, and donned a helmet. He was now completely a hunched little old man, seemingly struggling even to stand straight. However, his gaze was still sharp, watching Carl with vigilance and scrutiny. As for Kitty Pryde, she was no longer a young girl, but a woman who looked like a very mature older sister. However, this was normal. Although he didn't know her exact birth year, it was now the year 2029, and she was probably close to 40 years old. As long as she hasn't turned into a man. Among them, the one who surprised Carl the most was Jean Grey. The Phoenix Force seemed to have prevented major changes to her appearance, but the fatigue and aging in her expression were impossible to hide. She no longer possessed the charming mature woman aura Carl felt when he first watched the movie, but was instead filled with a sense of desolation. Just then, the portal behind Carl also closed. A woman, who was equally surprising and familiar to Carl, appeared in his sight. She was a woman with an Asian face, deep purple hair, green pupils, wearing leather clothes, and marked with a special tattoo on her face. Of course, Carl knew who this woman was. She was the female mutant who opened the portal for him, Blink. But the reason Carl was surprised was that on the very first night Carl arrived in this world, when he used his cell phone to search for information related to mutants in this world, Carl discovered something. That is, the mutant named Blink seemed not to exist in this world. After all, being a mutant with similar abilities, Carl was quite interested in Blink. Of course, he couldn't be certain. After all, it was normal for a lot of mutant information not to be found online. But just now, when Kitty Pryde suddenly spoke the name Clarice, Carl keenly sensed something unusual, that the other party was probing for something. Furthermore, the fact that they didn't seem too surprised by Raven's appearance made Carl even more certain of his hypothesis. And now, this hypothesis had become reality, which was that the female mutant Blink behind him was not the one he was familiar with, Fan Bingbing. Image. But another woman. He was also familiar with this Blink. Because if he remembered correctly, this Blink should be from the TV series The Gifted. Image. So, what exactly was going on? Could it be that the Logan universe was linked to The Gifted? Just then, Magneto, floating in the sky and looking incredibly aged, offered an explanation. He watched Carl warily, spreading his hands, causing everything around to shake and emit creaking sounds of warning, and then asked. It seems you already know, Mr. Carl. Our universe does not have this Miss Clarice, so can you explain why this is? In that instant, Carl understood everything. In other words, the female mutant standing in front of him, Blink, had actually crossed over from the world of the Gifted. It left him rather stunned. He'd never watched the show, he only knew of it because Polaris, the female lead, had gone viral online for a while. She was gorgeous, so Carl had watched a few clips and thus recognized this TV version of Blink. Yet he was certain The Gifted had never featured a storyline like this. A crossover would have been the studio's biggest selling point, there was no way he could have missed it. So either there were plots he didn't know, or this wasn't the universe he was familiar with. Still, it served as a warning, from now on he would need to be far more careful. He couldn't rely on plot knowledge just because he was a transmigrator, letting his grasp of the world blur. Fortunately, the moment things felt off he'd already worked out Plan B in his head. While Carl was thinking, opposite him, Phoenix, Jean Grey, standing on a hovering disc stared at him in disbelief and exclaimed. Incredible. There's a powerful force in his mind that can actually resist my telepathic ability. As her words fell, Magneto and Kitty Pryde beside her, as well as Blink behind Carl, all stared at the unruffled Carl in astonishment. Whether it was Blink, who had only crossed into this world half a year ago, or the other two, they all knew that after Charles fell ill, Jean was the strongest telepath on Earth. Magneto kept his composure, only eyeing Carl with greater wariness as he said. No wonder he's so confident, walking in here alone. Magneto wasn't worried about what Carl might do. After all, besides being Earth's strongest telepath, Jean carried within her a power great enough to destroy the world. All right, Mr. Carl, answer my question. Even if you're a mutant, I won't hesitate to keep you here permanently. Carl didn't reply directly. His gaze openly slid to Jean beside Magneto, the woman who possessed the mightiest energy in the Marvel Universe, the Phoenix Force, and countered. Since you want answers, why not let me bring Raven here? She can't resist your telepathy. With a wave of Magneto's hand, the steel beams around Carl creaked again. I'm the one asking questions, Mr. Carl. You only need to answer. Carl wasn't intimidated and fired back. Then how will you be sure whatever I say next is the truth? Boom. A steel rod whizzed past Carl, piercing the floor at his feet. This is your final warning, Mr. Carl. Magneto's aged yet icy voice echoed through the vast cave. Carl wasn't shaken by the threat, instead he swept an amused glance over everyone before slowly saying. Fine. Thereupon Carl explained the existence of the TVA to the four mutants before him, covering time variance, the god of stories, and the concept of timelines. He could clearly see the four frowning as he spoke. Honestly, if he weren't a transmigrator, he wouldn't have believed in the TVA either. Roughly 5 or 6 minutes later, Carl finished his concise explanation. That's the gist of it. The aged Magneto frowned deeply, staring at Carl with open skepticism as he said, Mr. Carl, perhaps you should invent a more believable excuse. I get it, it sounds crazy, but whether you believe it or not, it's the truth. Magneto's frown deepened, yet a hint of greed flashed in his eyes. Mr. Carl, you must produce something to prove your claim, say, that time controller of yours. Carl cocked an eyebrow at the elderly Magneto and said as if looking at an idiot. Do I look like a fool who'd bring something that vital here? The old Magneto's gaze turned frigid, with a sweep of his hand every scrap of metal in the cave sword. At that moment Jean Grey, silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Enough, Eric. The elderly Magneto turned, surprised, and regarded her gravely as he said. Jean, you're not buying his story. TVA sounds like something made up to fool children. With that, Magneto looked toward Kitty Pryde and blinked. If he said he got here via his own gift, I'd find it easier to believe. Now Kitty hesitated. Honestly, she didn't believe it either, mainly because the so-called TVA was too outrageous. It was as if everyone's fate was being manipulated by them. And they themselves had become actors in some TV show or movie. To their doubts, Jean had only one cold reply. Remember, Eric, right now, I'm the one in charge here. Magneto's pupils shrank. Meeting Jean's icy gaze, he swallowed whatever he'd been about to say. Okay, Jean, you're the boss here, whatever you say goes. Kitty's face twisted in pain. She could sense that ever since the Westchester incident Jean's mood had grown increasingly erratic. Meanwhile, Blink behind Carl couldn't help stepping forward, asking anxiously. Can that time controller you mentioned send me back to the world I came from? Carl didn't answer, but Kitty Pryde interjected urgently. No, Clarice, this world's mutants need your ability. Blink was torn. I know, Kitty, but Lorna and the others need me more, and if what he says is true, I can still come back. Kitty understood Clarice didn't belong to their world, and they had no right to make her stay, yet her gift was now far too important to the dwindling mutant population. Watching the mutants fall into disarray in front of a complete stranger, Carl was speechless. At a time like this, the mutants of this era still couldn't unite. Perhaps sensing Carl's gaze, Jean, the true boss here, finally stepped forward, replacing Magneto. With a wave of her hand she returned every piece of metal to its original place beside Carl, then asked. Mr. Carl, can you answer Clarice's question? Of course. Carl, now free again, sounded relaxed. Theoretically, yes. With the time controller you could hop across any multiverse. The problem is, I can't pinpoint which universe this Clarice came from. As I said when I introduced the TVA, I need the exact universe designation. Beyond that, the timeline and the moment matter. If I'm a little late it might be fine, but if I arrive too early, her world could end up with two Clarices, spawning a brand new timeline. Hope had lit Clarice's eyes. At the possibility of duplication they filled with dread. In fact, we chose this world purely by luck. If Miss Clarice is willing to wait, maybe after a few more tries, if my luck improves, I'll stumble onto the universe you came from. A spark of hope returned to Clarice's gaze, and Kitty quietly exhaled. Only Jean kept staring at Carl, as though trying to see straight through him. Carl didn't seem to mind, he simply asked. Can I take it we've reached a basic trust? If so, let's bring the children over first and get them settled. You can use Raven to confirm whether I'm lying. Jean Grey's reply was as terse as ever. Of course. With Jean, the de facto leader, giving the nod, everything became simple. Clarice didn't even have to act. Carl opened a portal himself. The ease of it made everyone's eyes brighten. As a fellow portal-creating mutant, Clarice could feel how effortless it was for Carl. No gut-wrenching strain, no exhaustion like she suffered every time. Kitty was already thinking ahead. If Clarice really went home, perhaps this man's power could help them too, another path in reserve. Magneto, however, had been frowning throughout, gaze fixed on Carl, lost in thought. Just as Carl's portal blossomed open, on the far side Raven, escorting the young mutants, saw it appear and spotted the group waiting beyond. In that instant, mutants from two worlds looked each other in the eye, every gaze complicated. Bring the kids through, Raven. Everything's settled. Raven nodded, a little nervously, and led the children one by one through the portal. From the moment she stepped out, Raven's eyes locked on the aged Magneto. Eric. She spoke the name with feeling, but Magneto answered only with an icy stare and colder words. Look at yourself, Raven. You're not the Mystique I knew. With that, Magneto levitated the metal beneath his feet and flew off alone. Raven stood at a loss until Kitty stepped forward. I don't know what you and your world's Eric shared, but in ours Eric abandoned you. Raven flinched, her heart lurching. Her youthful bewilderment startled Kitty. She couldn't reconcile this pretty, inexperienced girl with the cold, ruthless Mystique she remembered, but she explained anyway. Our world faced an anti-mutant crisis. During it, you lost your powers. When they finally returned, Eric decided you weren't a real mutant anymore and cast you aside. The professor was the one who saved you. The excitement Raven had felt at seeing Eric drained away into emptiness. Then what about me in this world? Kitty glanced at Jean beside her and answered, voice heavy with sorrow. Dead. 1 year ago the professor lost control of his power, for 5 full minutes. You, Scott, Hank, Aurora, Anna, Bobby, and Alan all died. Only Jean and I survived, thanks to our abilities. The entire cave fell silent. Though Raven had learned the facts from the news, hearing them spoken aloud still carved an indescribable pain through her. Sensing the suffocating mood, Carl looked at the curious children and spoke up. Let's leave this for later. First we should settle the kids. Follow me. Led by Kitty, Carl and Raven escorted the 14 children out of the cave, leaving only Jean and Clarice inside. Under an azure sky, a salty sea breeze brushed every cheek. The moment he stepped outside, Carl understood what Eden truly was. A floating island adrift upon the open ocean. Kitty took the initiative, introducing the place to Carl, Raven, and the newcomers. The island used to be called Genosha, controlled by Eric's Brotherhood of Mutants. After the Westchester incident, a year ago, Eric sought out Jean and me and invited us here. Then shouldn't Eric be the one in charge? Carl asked, curious. In theory, yes. But Eric's grown old, the Brotherhood is nearly gone. He can't protect mutants anymore. Jean's power is our last hope. As Kitty finished, a small village appeared before them. Though Carl had known mutant numbers were pitiful, no new ones born in 25 years, the sight of this primitive scene still shocked him. The hamlet looked straight out of medieval Europe, crude, destitute. The few mutants were elderly, their eyes holding no future, only the resignation of those waiting to die. Raven's body trembled once more, crushed by despair. Are these really all the mutants? How many are left? Carl asked. Kitty couldn't hide her desolation. Including Jean, Eric, and me, 168. And the number drops every month. Everyone's aging, our world hasn't seen a new mutant birth in 25 years. As for the future, no one knows. In that instant Raven fully grasped why Carl had made every preparation. She would never let her own world slide into this fate. Still, you don't have to live this, harshly. Carl chose a gentler word. We have no choice. After the professor lost control, no one could protect our mutants. We can only move about between noon and 5 page. The hours human satellites can't see us. Yet that isn't the worst of it. The most hopeless part is. Kitty's gaze drifted toward the distance. There, on the cliff above the cave they'd left, stood Jean, utterly alone. Jean's becoming a stranger. The Westchester incident hit her hard. On one side Scott, the man she loved, on the other, the professor she revered. Kitty didn't finish. In truth, she was no different. Her lover, Iceman Bobby, had died at the hands of the teacher she most admired. Just then Carl broke the silence. Raven, take the children and get them settled. I'll go have a word with Miss Gray. On a cliff washed by sea breeze. Jean Grey, the phoenix, stood there in a deep red gown, gazing at the far side of the ocean. Her eyes were cold, her expression calm as she stared into the distance, as though nothing in this world mattered to her any longer. Just then, footsteps sounded behind her. Hello, Ms. Jean Grey. Mr. Carl. The two looked at each other. Jean spoke first. What is it? I'd love to say nothing, but the truth is I do need your help, though I worry it might sound offensive. Carl tried to appear as nonchalant as possible. A flicker of curiosity crossed Jean's eyes. If you don't say it, how can you be sure I'll find it offensive? All right, then I'll be direct. Without wasting words, Carl glanced at the village below the distant mountain and stated his purpose. Ms. Jean Grey, I need the help of the power inside you. Boom. In that instant Jean's eyes blazed crimson, as if flames were burning within them. A crushing pressure surged straight at Carl. Carl had to act. He could feel this force could easily fling him dozens of meters away. Pale blue spatial fields spilled out, forming a protective barrier around him. Scorching tongues of fire swept through the surroundings. Trees, grass, stones, everything was blasted away. Yet Carl stood firm under the spatial field's protection, unharmed. Don't misunderstand, his spatial magic didn't block real-world matter and energy like a shield. He merely twisted the space around him so the shockwaves, though seemingly close, were in truth hundreds of kilometers away. It was the same principle he used to enlarge or shrink objects. Still, the burning eyes of Jean showed surprise before they cooled again. Who are you? I've searched everything Raven knows, and I'm certain you're far from simple. You recognize Clarice, me, Kitty, you know the power inside me, and, most important, you are the only. Carl understood the lead up, but the word, only, left him stunned. Only? What do you mean? Since you know the power inside me, you should know it's unique. Unlike any force or being in the multiverse, the Phoenix is singular. Every Phoenix across the multiverse is merely a reflection of that one true Phoenix. So I believe you're from another universe, but unlike Clarice, I can see other versions of her across the multiverse, yet you don't exist in any of them. Carl wasn't surprised by that. What intrigued him more was something else. Ms. Jean Grey, you and the Phoenix Force are on such good terms now that you can observe other universes through it. Jean knew he was changing the subject, but she didn't mind. I couldn't before, but ever since the Westchester incident a year ago I gained this ability. At first I saw only strange images I didn't understand, until in one vision I saw a dying Clarice in another universe. I took control of her and opened a portal, bringing her here and saving her. So that's how it was. Which meant Jean could send Clarice back as well as bring her here. Carl, however, wasn't foolish enough to ask. Jean posed another question. So you want to become the new host of this power? Also. Carl was startled. You mean someone before me wanted to be its host? Of course. Jean said calmly, then waved her hand. Out of apparently empty sky the elderly Magneto drifted over in semi-transparent form. Eric, if you want to listen, you don't have to sneak. You know your powers can't hide you from me. One of Magneto's tricks, by manipulating magnetism he can bend light around him, turning invisible. Caught, Magneto showed no shame. He dismissed his power and stared warily at Carl. I know, Jean, but that's not the point. The point is you now see this Mr. Carl's real purpose. Carl understood. So, Mr. Eric, you're the one who wanted to become the Phoenix's new host. At Carl's taunting smile Magneto's face darkened. We're no different, young man. You want the power inside Jean too. Better it go to me than to an outsider from another universe, with it I can save our world's mutants. Carl rolled his eyes. You've got it wrong. I have no intention of becoming the Phoenix's host. Jean looked surprised. Magneto sneered. You expect me to believe that, kid? Carl didn't mind the contempt. Believe what you want, but I truly don't plan to. Because I understand one thing better than you. This power is too great, so great I have zero confidence I could control it. A power I can't command, no matter how mighty, is nothing but a burden to me. Carl wasn't lying. As a transmigrator he knew better than anyone how terrifying the Phoenix Force was, one of Marvel Universe's mightiest powers, and prone to driving its hosts insane. He wasn't qualified to wield it, yet. Perhaps his sincerity left Magneto unsure, but Jean suddenly asked. You really don't want to become the new host of the Phoenix Force? Of course not. To be blunt, I'd rather not turn into a lunatic. The remark left Jean Grey and Magneto stunned. Mr. Carl, that was rather rude. Jean said slowly. Having seen the multiverse, she knew exactly whom he meant. Other universe versions of herself corrupted by the Phoenix. Magneto, still suspicious, pressed. Then why seek Jean? You said yourself you came for the Phoenix Force inside her. I did, but you must have been too far away to hear clearly. I said I need the Phoenix Force's help. Help. Yes. Carl cut to the chase. I've come for only one thing. I've heard mutant abilities can evolve or be strengthened a second time, so can the Phoenix Force enhance my mutant power. As a transmigrator, Carl, who had consumed countless novels and films, understood one thing very well. Never be greedy and chase power you can't possibly control. No matter how tempting it looks. Carl also remembered that, under outside stimulation, a mutant's X gene could evolve a second time. This wasn't apocalypse-style enhancement, it was a genuine secondary mutation. He had Emma to thank for that. After watching X-Men First Class in his previous life, he'd been captivated by the White Queen, Emma, and looked up her details, where he'd found the concept of secondary mutation. The world might be different, but he still wanted to try. So Carl's motive for seeking out Jean Grey was simple: see whether the Phoenix Force could strengthen him. If it could boost his spatial magic, great. If not, gaining a new ability would be fine. At worst he'd just get a physical upgrade. Hearing this, Jean Grey finally believed Carl truly didn't want to become the Phoenix's host. This wasn't some coy refusal. When he spoke of lunatics, the disdain and arrogance in his tone were unmistakable. It stunned her. In Jean's heart, the Phoenix Force had always been as great and untouchable as God. Yet now, while she could understand his fear of its side effects, the arrogance in his voice seemed unbelievable, as though so mighty a power were nothing special before him. That instantly roused the Phoenix's own displeasure from deep within her. So she spoke. What if I say no? Then I'll apologize for the intrusion and be on my way. He still had plenty of chances to visit other universes. This trip to the Logan world alone had already given him a windfall of tech. Still, Jean's wording left him a sliver of hope. After all, she'd said, if. So, is it possible or not? Magneto likewise turned to Jean Grey, curious. At his age a second mutation might be pointless, yet he remained fascinated by that mighty force, a curiosity planted the first time he and Charles met Jean and witnessed her power. Sorry, you'll be disappointed, and you too, Eric. Strictly speaking, I wield the Phoenix's power, but I can't control it. Meaning? Eric frowned. The Phoenix is so strong it has its own will, she chooses suitable hosts. If displeased, she'll abandon them. And when she picks, there's one criterion. Which is, the candidate must possess formidable mental strength. Truthfully, Carl couldn't help but feel let down. After all, this was the Phoenix Force. More importantly, as she spoke, flames suddenly blazed in Jean's eyes. Becoming her host means opening your heart completely to her, Mr. Carl. Carl raised an eyebrow. He understood perfectly. The secret of his transmigration wasn't something he could let anyone learn. This was still Marvel, a setting where the fourth wall already existed. I see. In that case, sorry to have bothered you. Please look after those kids for me. Carl bade farewell without hesitation. Are you leaving, Mr. Carl, returning to your world? No, not yet. Raven's worried about the Charles of your world, so we'll go find Charles and Logan. The fire in Jean's eyes died, her expression turning complicated. To Jean, Charles had once been her most respected teacher, until the accident in which the professor killed Scott. She no longer knew how to face him, let alone with Logan there as well. Magneto's eyes, however, lit up. Do you know where Charles is now? No idea, just have to try our luck. Magneto gave a meaningful smile, glancing at Jean. Maybe you should ask her, she's now the most powerful telepath in our world. In that instant Carl smelled a scheme. Not only did it seem Magneto wouldn't be so helpful, but if he'd wanted to aid Charles and Logan he could have acted long ago. Worse, he again sensed the cold look in Jean's eyes, so he politely declined. No, no need. I'll manage on my own. After all, the US isn't that big. With that, Carl prepared to leave. But at that moment Jean, now exuding an icy aura, coldly stated. Rest here tonight. Tomorrow morning I'll tell you where Charles is. In a secret cave on Eden Island. The mutant trinity, Phoenix Jean Grey, Magneto Eric, and Shadowcat Kitty, had arrived. As the cavern door opened, a silver-white world greeted them. At its center stood an odd machine. All three stared at the silvery device. It was Cerebro from the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. Ever since Charles lost control a year ago, Magneto had relocated the machine here for mutant safety. Though Jean's return to locate the professor sounded hopeful, Kitty, faced with this cold, unfamiliar Jean, couldn't help worrying. Magneto then asked, Jean, are you truly ready? Jean's reply was still icy. Isn't this what you've always wanted me to do? She looked straight at Magneto as she spoke. Magneto didn't hide his aim. Yes, Jean. You were never meant to suppress your gift. The force inside you can change everything. You know better than anyone how mighty that Phoenix is. Look at our kind's plight. This world needs you to lead mutants and change it all. You have the duty and the power. Kitty, standing nearby, was stunned. What are you talking about? Aren't we here to find the professor? Neither answered. With frosty calm, Jean walked toward Cerebro. Sensing something wrong, Kitty tried to stop her, but Magneto acted first, conjuring an energy field that wrapped around Kitty and nullified her powers. Kitty knew the trick, it was one of Eric's abilities. The field isolated all matter and energy, rendering her phasing useless. Now Kitty realized things were dire. Eric, what did you talk her into? Jean, don't do anything stupid. She naturally blamed Magneto. Yet his answer chilled her to the bone. No, Kitty, this has nothing to do with me. This is Jean's own choice. Magneto watched Jean settle into the chair and don the helmet, his voice turning cold. Ever since Charles lost control a year ago, the mental cage in Jean's mind shattered. The beast is already loose. Now she'll draw the source of that power into our world, and change everything. Thanks for watching.